Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry, Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It is 12 o'clock on Thursday, the 5th of September. I'm Mark Dolan, and she...
I'm Dawn Neeson.
There you go.
I know. I had to remember. I had to think about that bit. Right. OK. Cracking show coming up now. A proposed crackdown, indeed, on water company bosses who could face 2 years in prison for not controlling the sewage, chemical and manure flowing into our waterways. Could this plan put the end to the flow of filth being pumped into our rivers?
Indeed. Meanwhile, time to teach Labour a lesson. Campaigners make a last-ditch attempt to scrap the VAT raid on private schools, arriving on Downing Street armed with over 200,000 signatures calling for a reversal of the tax. We're joined by an angry head teacher.
Looking forward to that one. And not pretty for Patel, as she's knocked out of the Tory leadership race. Robert Jenrick takes pole position with Kemi in second. We'll have the latest on the runners and riders throughout the show.
Absolutely. Plus, heir to the throne. Have you ever wondered what the best airport in the UK is? Do we have any good airports at all? We'll bring you the definitive list to discuss just what makes a good airport. It's plain and simple.
That is dreadful. That is really dreadful. The puns involved in that is dreadful.
Well, indeed, top congratulations to our producer, Tom. Now, we want to hear from you throughout the show.
It.
No, I'm not that good.
No, that's
I've
true.
got someone else doing the gags now. Head to gbnews.com/your say. Lots to get through. A big 3 hours. First, the headlines and Sam Francis.
Very good afternoon to you. It's just coming up to 2 minutes past 12, and the top story this lunchtime: water bosses could face up to 2 years in jail under new laws aimed at cracking down on pollution in England's rivers, seas and lakes. The government claims the new water bill gives regulators more power to fine executives or face time behind bars if they fail to protect water quality. Meanwhile, the government's admitted not all buildings with the same dangerous cladding as Grenfell Tower have been identified following the damning findings published yesterday. The Prime Minister's pledged to review all 58 recommendations from the Grenfell inquiry, with a full response due within 6 months. The reports heavily criticised firms, with families and survivors now calling for swift punishment for those found at fault. Meanwhile, the Metropolitan Police are continuing to investigate potential criminal charges, which they say could take between 12 and 18 months. Detectives investigating the murder of a top chef attack near Notting Hill Carnival have released images of 16 potential witnesses. Museum Netu from Dubai was found unconscious with a head injury in Queensway in London and sadly died 4 days later. One man has been charged, but detectives are still piecing together the 41-year-old's movements from earlier in the day. The Met's Specialist Crime Command is urging anyone who recognises the people in the images to come forward, with detectives saying they do believe the individuals may have vital information. A 14-year-old boy has been appearing in court this morning charged with murdering an 80-year-old grandfather in Leicestershire. Bim Coley, who died from a neck injury while walking his dog, was just seconds away from home at the time of that attack. The boy, who can't be named, has been remanded in custody and will be appearing at Leicestershire Crown Court this afternoon. An urgent appeal has been launched to find a 10-month-old girl who's gone missing with her father. Merseyside police are asking the public to help find Layla Rose Wheeler, who was last seen in the area of Wallasey Village in Wirral. A spokesman from the police force said there is concern for both of their welfare and added that the girl has short blonde hair and blue eyes. TV host Jeremy Kyle has arrived at Winchester Coroner's Court to give evidence at an inquest into the death of Steve Diamond, who died after appearing on The Jeremy Kyle Show in 2019. The 63-year-old from Portsmouth reportedly took his own life just a week after failing a lie detector test on the programme, which accused him of cheating on his partner. The inquest has so far revealed that Diamond had a history of mental health issues, including multiple attempts to take his own life, and had been rejected initially by the show due to depression. Despite those findings, though, he was later allowed to appear on the programme after providing a GP's letter. News from the US, and students, families and teachers have gathered to remember the victims of a mass school shooting there just weeks after classes began. A 14-year-old boy, described by police as pure evil, killed 2 students and 2 teachers at his high school in Georgia last night. Colt Gray also injured 9 others with a semi-automatic rifle before surrendering to police. Authorities have now confirmed the boy had previously been questioned last year over online threats, but acted alone in the attack. He will be charged and tried as an adult. Here, universities could slide into decline unless urgent action's taken to address funding pressures, according to various education leaders, including the president of Universities UK. She's warning institutions face uncertain futures because of frozen tuition fees and a drop in overseas students. It comes as new research shows higher education contributes around £265 billion a year to the UK economy. Meanwhile, the government says it is considering all options to safeguard higher education. 7 in 10 children aged 9 to 13 have encountered harmful online content, according to new research. 20% of children in that age group have also been contacted online by strangers, while 17% have viewed dangerous online challenges. Despite spending an average of 23 hours online a week, parents are being warned about underestimating their children's screen time. The government insists it is committed to creating a safer online world. And Royal Mail could ditch Saturday deliveries for second-class letters as part of an overhaul by the UK's postal service, now under review by the regulator Ofcom. The plan would see second-class post delivered on alternate weekdays, while first-class would remain 6 days a week. Ofcom, which has been consulting on those changes since January this year, is hoping to finalise its decision by the summer of 2025. Royal Mail argues the current setup is no longer workable, and that, they say, is why it's pushing for reform. Those are the latest headlines from the GB Newsroom for now. I'm Sam Francis. More in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you very much, Sam, and welcome to Good Afternoon Britain. Now, I'm going to start by reading one of your comments, because my favourite bit of the show is reading your comments.
Of course it is.
This is from Nanny. Good afternoon, Nanny. How long before Mark gives an innuendo? Never change, Mr D.
There you go. Well, look, thank you for that vote of confidence. Let me tell you, it's a big 3 hours. Let's talk about our polluted rivers and seas.
Yes, now, water firm bosses could face up to 2 years behind bars for covering up sewage dumping. The new laws proposed by the government will give more powers to regulators to tackle pollution and make it easier for companies to be fined.
Water company executives had previously only faced the threat of fines for obstructing investigations about sewage spills. But is being sent to prison really the answer to protecting the environment? I'm delighted now to be joined by GB News' political correspondent, Catherine Forster. Catherine, could the jailing of water company executives make a difference?
Good afternoon, Mark and Dawn. Well, the expectation, I think, is not actually that they are going to lock up water bosses who behave badly, but the threat of doing so will be sufficient to bring them into line. Now, Steve Reed, the Environment Secretary, was just giving a speech in the last hour or so at a rowing club just to my right, next to the River Thames. Of course, we remember the boat race earlier in the year. There were warnings that people shouldn't enter the water because of bacteria from the levels of sewage. So quite an appropriate place for this speech. Let's have a look at some of what he had to say just a little bit earlier.
Instead of protecting our waterways, water companies were allowed to pay out multi-million-pound bonuses and billions in dividends, and the Conservative government was too weak to stop them. The result? This year's annual boat race here in Putney was overshadowed by health warnings telling rowers not to enter the water due to high levels of sewage. We've inherited a broken water system that affects us all, from the health and happiness of communities to the quality and resilience of our food system and the natural environment. These are systemic issues that require a proper reset with a reformed water sector.
So they say they're going to toughen up Ofwat, the regulator, they're going to give the Environment Agency more powers, they're going to increase fines for water companies. The automatic fine is just £300 for water pollution, absolutely nothing to some of these big companies. They're going to block bonuses for water polluting chief executives, a whole raft of measures. And also talking more broadly about investment. They say they're going to unlock £88 billion of private investments. That's going to lead to things like 9 new reservoirs, and they said it's going to bring, thousands and hundreds of thousands of new jobs to Britain. Also talking about the fact that we are using too much water. Frankly, they want us to reduce how much water we use by 20%, and also that by the late 2030s, we simply won't have enough water for all the people in the UK. So water shortages and lots of action needed to be taken. So a lot of words about how bad things are, a lot of promises of change, but of course, easier to say these things than to actually do them.
Catherine Forster, thank you very much. Bringing us up to date now on the new laws governing what is being pumped into our rivers and waterways. Professor Christian Dunn is an environmental scientist at Bangor University, and he joins us now to explain what difference this will make, if any. Professor, thank you very much for joining us this morning. What do you make of these new laws that are coming in? Is it too much, or is it too little, too late?
Oh, it's most certainly not too much. And I would always support any government of any colour that made this a serious issue and tried to do something about it. And by toughening up the laws and the regulations, which appears to be what has happened now, that can only be a good thing. So I am, as an eternal optimist, I'm hopeful it will make a change. But this is not a silver bullet. This is not going to solve the problem without a doubt.
Professor Dunn, do you think that privatisation gets a bad rap in terms of water quality and cleanliness in the UK, because the water infrastructure was privatised in 1989, famously under Margaret Thatcher. At that time, as you'll be well aware, water quality was poor, rivers were polluted, and our beaches were affected by sewage at the time. Since then, £160 billion has been invested. So what's your verdict on privatisation?
I think as a society, we need a nuanced, sensible discussion about this. We need to accept that we need to pay for our water, and we probably need to accept that we need to pay more for our water if we want it to be potable, clean when it comes out of the tap, but also as well, especially the environmental side of things. At the present time, the water industry is not fit for purpose. It's not what society wants, and it's most certainly not what the environment needs. Whether that's done privately or whether that's done publicly needs to be a national debate, bearing in mind the pros and the cons of both. For example, if we have public ownership of the water, then the water industry, as it will then be, will be vying for funds from health, from defence, from other areas.
Right.
That may be something that we want to accept as a society. Or do we accept that we have to pay, and we have to pay, arguably we have to pay more for our water, but a private company makes money from that? It's more of it's a discussion that we need to have, but as is that society, and we need to then move forward with that, because as I say, what we've got now is not sustainable. But crucially as well, what we must do as a nation is understand that, as I said, tougher sanctions, tougher laws is not going to solve this problem, because this problem goes beyond the water companies. And the water companies are like these bogeymen at the present time. And I'm obviously not here to defend them. What they've done in certain areas is not correct. But this problem of polluted rivers and coasts is more than that. It is how we have managed our land and how we've built development, how we've been as a society. That's what's led to some of these problems. We have, for example, got rid of over the past 200 years around 75% of our wetlands, those river buffer strips, for example, which can clean our water and which can store water as well. Your reporter then was talking about water shortages. Well, wetlands act as giant sponges in the landscape. They soak water up when there's lots of it and then release it slowly. We've got rid of these nature-based solutions which can help us. When we have new development now, when we build new buildings, they are not built in a way to manage water. Surface water, rainwater flows into the same system as the sewage.
Briefly, Professor Dunn, would you take our water infrastructure back into public hands?
As an environmental scientist, I should say I don't have an official opinion of that. What I would say is, as a nation, we need to discuss it, but we need to accept that the water companies are not just the bogeymen. They are part of a much wider societal failure.
Professor Dunn, just quickly, because we are running out of time on this, you mentioned that it is all our responsibility. It's not just the fault of the water companies, which I find very interesting. Now, Labour government have pledged to build on Greenbelt, build loads of new houses. How concerned are you about balancing the two things up, getting clean, fresh water for everybody, but also carrying out that building programme?
The building programme is essential, and what we have to be doing, as I said, is look at how we are building our new buildings. It's no good in how we're building them now with all this concrete everywhere. What we need to be doing is, they're called sustainable drainage systems. All it is a fancy way of saying that we need more soil, more grass wherever we can to allow rainwater to soak into the ground naturally rather than ending up in our sewage system. You go to France now, they are literally tearing up car park after car park, all that tarmac, and putting down a permeable paving system so cars can still park on it, but when it rains, it soaks into the ground and doesn't end up in the sewage system. That's what we need to be looking at. This is a societal failure across many sectors, and we need a holistic, wide-reaching approach to solve it.
Go for it.
One final word. Sorry, I keep saying that, but how long would it take to get things back to be right so we have clean water?
Oh, that's a really good question. Because, again, it's a societal problem. Yes, water companies, we need to be harder on them. Yeah, and I'm supporting the kind of putting people in jail if they don't do right. So that's one thing. But then we need to be incorporating these infrastructure changes, these landscape changes to our society. But if we did it right, you are talking, this is not an immediate problem that's going to be solved overnight, but you are talking within a sensible time period, a generation of seeing massive, huge, significant differences to the quality of our rivers.
It's money. It's money, isn't it, Prof? By the way, before you go, do you swim in the sea or in rivers?
I do, yes, indeed, yes.
All right. And do you worry that you're going to swallow the water and get E. coli or something?
Yeah, of course I do. There's simple precautions you have to make sure that you take. Keep an eye on Surf Against Sewage. Have a great app which kind of show you where there's been kind of outflows. But also never swim after heavy rainfall, because even the clean always going to be bad. So be careful where you do it and be careful of when you do it.
Brilliant stuff.
Thank you very much. That is Professor Christian Dunn there joining us to explain the state of our water.
Interesting man. I'm picturing him in his Speedos, by the way. Top professor.
That's just very, very wrong,
there you go.
by the way. But there isn't a single river in this country that has actually passed.
Not a single river. I go to my local ponds and it's absolutely filthy. But the bottom line is don't swallow the water, don't put your head under the water and you'll probably be all right.
Is it filthy before you get in or after?
I've made it worse, I can't lie. Use it as a bath.
This is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News, and there's lots more coming up on today's show. Campaigners look to teach Labour a lesson in tax affairs as they arrive on Downing Street with over 200,000 signatures calling for reversal on that VAT raid. We're speaking to a head teacher very soon.
Indeed, she's not happy.
Headliners. Tomorrow's papers tonight. Every night from 11 p.m.
Bad news for Liberal mothers who want to score virtue points by transitioning their kids, Lewis. Tell us what it is.
A California dad is granted full custody of 4-year-old son after boy's mom tried to raise the child non-binary.
It's almost like cult-like behaviour. You've got the mother transitioning and then the transitioning the son as well. It's interesting that, it's almost like a religion. You get, if you're a Christian, your kids are probably going to be Christian. If you're, Hindu, your kids are probably going to be Hindu. And if you're transgender, your kids are probably going to be transgender.
There's absolutely a causation there. We see plenty of times in videos. This is exactly it. And also we see the children of celebrities and people in particularly sort of liberal environments. It doesn't happen in some village in Indonesia or whatever. Yeah. Anyway, so there's no such thing as a trans child. There's no such thing as non-binary. What there is are people with mental health issues and parents who want a virtual signal and also want to brainwash their children. This is an egregious example of that, where she was basically taking him to Disneyland, but he couldn't get on a ride unless he wore princess shoes. I mean, really evil, horrible stuff. Forced to wear a dress on his birthday. Just really nasty stuff. Now, here's the thing. You talk about the court going to him. No, that's not what happened. He took 800 pages of documentary evidence. He took 8 hours of police body camera footage showing this mental behaviour from the mother. And guess what? The courts ruled that the mum got him. They ruled against him. The only reason that he got custody of his child is because, thank God, a child protective services officer randomly got involved, looked into it themselves, and that's how he eventually got custody of the child. So the courts in America are utterly captured.
GB News, the People's Channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Welcome back now. Campaigners have made a last-ditch attempt to halt Labour's VAT raid on private schools. The Education Not Taxation group are set to deliver a petition to Downing Street today with over 200,000 signatures calling for a reversal.
Education Secretary Bridget Phillipson has claimed the money raised from the levy will fund 6,500 new teachers. But parents are worried they have to pull their children out of schools.
OK, well, let's now speak to a head teacher at Lichfield Cathedral School, Sue Hannam. I should call you Mrs. Hannam. Lovely to have you on the programme. All Labour want to do is get these private businesses to contribute VAT so that they can invest in the state sector. What's not to like?
Well, it sounds terribly simple, doesn't it? Until you factor in that we're talking about real children, real parents and education, and the level of disruption to all children as a result of this is frankly really alarming.
It seems to be. What impact are you seeing at your school, for example?
Well, I would say I'm a member of various head teacher groups, and collectively we're all seeing great hesitancy in terms of take-up of school places, genuine concern from parents who are worried about their ability to fund school places. And unfortunately, for a lot of those parents, the vast majority of those parents who are often really stretching themselves to pay for education, they really don't know how they're going to make the extra reach with VAT.
And Sue, let's be clear here. I mean, everyone thinks private schools. We're not talking about Eton. We're not talking about the very rich, because they can afford to swallow any VAT costs for imposed. We're talking about people that work hard to send their kids. Many parents of our send children. They rely on private schools to give their children the one-on-one care they need. Many ordinary families and children are going to suffer. And the one thing we never hear from the government is where these children are going to go if their parents can no longer afford to send them to private school.
Absolutely. And I think your point about send children is particularly well made. There are a large number of children with special educational needs and learning challenges who are, in our schools. They are there, sadly, because they have to be. And sometimes those parents are really struggling to put them in a setting where they know their needs will be met. At the moment, they can't see where those children will go if they have to leave the schools they're in. There's a big issue here around implementation and timing. Schools obviously run on an academic year. The implementation of this in the middle of a school year is extraordinarily disruptive, and I would say unnecessarily disruptive. And we would very much really like the government to consider the delay in the implementation of this, because whilst, yes, this has been talked about in the run-up to the election, to suddenly put this mid-school year could not be more upsetting for children and families.
Well, indeed, I think the human impact is colossal, and it's really not fair on those children to be taken out of a school. They're going to lose access to the teachers with whom they have a bond, and, of course, their friends as well, a social network. I think it's cruel, Sue, and I think it's egregious to tax any academic institution. However, some would argue that private schools divide our society and create a sort of two-tier Britain. What's your view on that?
They provide actually £1 billion worth of fee assistance, and there's a huge amount of partnership and collaborative work that's done. So I can speak here, I suppose, for Lichfield. We're a choir school, so this is something else to perhaps think about, that there are specialist schools and faith schools that are going to be particularly affected here. But actually, the partnership work we've done as outreach to 30,000 pupils in the maintained sector. We work absolutely hand in glove with music and singing outreach. And a lot of these projects, I think, will also be put in jeopardy. And that's tragic. And going back to what you were saying before about, not all schools being like Eton, it's probably worth bearing in mind that half of the independent schools in the country have less than 300 pupils, and a quarter of them have less than 155 pupils. We're talking about small community schools, real children, real families. It's very, very concerning indeed.
The other fact that astonishes me is Bridget Phillipson is claiming the money raised will fund 6,500 new teachers for state schools. If you actually drill down into those figures, that works out at one new teacher for every 2 state schools in the country. That's not really going to make a huge amount of difference, especially to children maybe at your school who are having to find a place in a state school.
Yes, and we would absolutely, all of us, I think, in education, you know, that everybody who works in education, it kind of doesn't matter what school you're in, wants the same for children. They want the best possible education provision for children. The fact remains that the targets for teacher recruitment have not been met for a number of years, and they've fallen short by thousands every year. So frankly, even if you've got money in the pocket, which is, let me say, very debatable, because even the IFS report, which is most favourable to the government, is, you know, making it clear that the evidence is thin and the impact is uncertain. Even if you've got the money to buy the teachers, where are the teachers? They haven't been there for years. Why do you think they're suddenly going to be there now? I think there's a huge and risky assumption in that too.
Sue Hannon, that's head teacher at Lichfield Cathedral School. Thank you very much for joining us this morning, talking about the... You know what annoys me about this story, Mark, is that everyone goes, the knee-jerk reaction, oh, private schools, you can afford it. But there's so many... I mean, one of my friends got a child with special needs. She has to be in a very small class to get an education. She's thriving.
Yeah.
My friend can't afford to send her to the private school once the VAT figures go up. It's these children that are going to suffer.
Well, indeed, and there's an aspect that the economy should be taken into account, because investment into the UK is higher than that into Germany, Italy and France combined. Now, why is that? Well, because we have a brilliant country in which you want to live, fabulous weather, great cities, but also excellent schooling as well. And a lot of wealthy, well-heeled people come to the UK and invest here because the schools are so good, but not if you clobber them.
No, globally, we are ranked number 2 for education after USA.
There you go, I'll take that. Well, you're a good
But
evidence.
let's know what you think. Yeah, right, OK. Let's think what you think on this one. GBNews.com/your say. I'll get that right. You can see the education, exactly. No gold star for me. But we'll move on now. Millions of people across the country are at breaking point as shockingly low incomes leave them without the basics and fearing debt collectors.
And that is according to the debt advice charity Christians Against Poverty, who have released a report. This report shows that 11.8 million people in the UK simply do not have enough money to live on. Anna Riley has the story.
Christians Against Poverty debt advisors like Helen Bolton provide free financial support in churches across the nation. The charity's latest report warns that chronically low incomes are devastating the lives of millions in the UK. This is due to a deficit budget where people's earnings aren't enough to cover the essentials.
We're really surprised to find out that 22% of the population are in this situation, and that equates in the UK to 14.4 million people that are inevitably living in poverty because they've not got enough money coming in to pay their essential bills. The overall headline inflation is coming down, but inflation on the basics of life is not coming down, or is coming down very, very slowly. Meanwhile, incomes, whether that's salaries, wages or benefits, have not gone up anywhere near in line with inflation, and so inevitably things are squeezed.
Michelle Neal was helped by the charity after falling into £30,000 of debt. Her home was repossessed and she relied on food banks as her carer's wage didn't cover her bills.
There weren't any food in house. It was just one nightmare after another, and we had to start... Well, basically what we had to do is we had to go back and live with Mum for a while. And bearing in mind Mum had dementia, which weren't good, but fortunately council came through because we were classed as homeless. Council came through and we got... It weren't greatest of properties, but it were a roof over his head. Not easy when you're on your own, paying bills and things like that, especially if it's going to go up.
With the energy price increase next month, Christians Against Poverty want the government to take action now.
We will have people who are cold, who are sitting in the dark, who have... The mental health is going down the pan. One of the things that we're campaigning for is for the government to look at like a minimum income standard, whether that is through benefits or whether that is through legislation about minimum wages or minimum hours that people are contracted for. I guess just to accept that there's not a lot more can be done about expenditure, and so we've got to look at giving the minimum level of income to all families.
Christians Against Poverty are calling for the public to support their campaign, and they hope the Labour Party will listen. Anna Riley, GB News.
A very important report. Thank you to Anna for that. By the way, the emails are coming in thick and fast. Wendy is not happy about our dirty water, the rivers, drinking water, you name it. Sewage must be sorted. Top priority. Forget the net zero white elephant, says Wendy.
Meanwhile, Bag Lady, you're not happy about what Labour are doing to both children and pensioners. She says they are attacking education and pensions from the cradle to grave.
OK, well, it's a bit gloomy, the picture at the moment, isn't it? I've got to say. But listen, is there hope in the form of the next leader of the Conservative Party? Priti Patel out of the race. Robert Jenrick takes pole position with Kemi Badenoch just behind. We'll be joined by a top Tory MP who's going to give his verdict on who he would like to lead the party next. Lots to get through, but first, the news headlines and Sam Francis.
Very good afternoon to you from the newsroom at 12:33 exactly, and we'll start with some breaking news from the Crown Prosecution Service, who have said that they are dropping 2 indecent assault charges against Harvey Weinstein. It was alleged the disgraced Hollywood producer had assaulted a woman now aged in her 50s in 1996 in London. However, the Special Crime Division, which continually reassesses cases, says it found no realistic chance of conviction. In a statement, the Crown Prosecution Service have reiterated, though, their commitment to prosecuting sexual assault cases and encourage any potential victims to come forward and to report to police. Detectives investigating the murder of a top chef attacked near Notting Hill Carnival have released images of 16 potential witnesses. Museum Netu from Dubai was found unconscious with a head injury in Queensway in the capital, but sadly died 4 days later. One man has been charged, but detectives are still piecing together the 41-year-old's movements from earlier that day. The Met Specialist Crime Command is now urging anyone who recognises those in the images to come forward, and they believe the individuals may have vital information to aid their investigation. Water bosses could face up to 2 years in jail under new laws aimed at cracking down on pollution in England's rivers, seas and lakes. The government claims the new water bill gives regulators more power to fine executives or face time behind bars if they fail to protect water quality. The government has admitted that not all buildings with the same dangerous cladding as Grenfell Tower have been identified after a damning report published yesterday. The Prime Minister's pledged to review all 58 recommendations from the Grenfell inquiry, with a full response due within 6 months. That report heavily criticised firms like Arconic and Kingspan, with families and survivors calling for swift punishment for those found at fault. Meanwhile, the Met Police are continuing to investigate potential criminal charges, which they say could take up to 18 months. A 14-year-old boy has appeared in court charged with murdering an 8-year-old man in Leicestershire. The grandfather, Bim Coley, who died from a neck injury while walking his dog, was just seconds away from home. The boy, who can't be named, has been remanded in custody and is appearing at Leicester Crown Court later today. And finally, just a breaking line to bring you from France this afternoon. The EU's former Brexit negotiator, Michel Barnier, has been appointed as French Prime Minister. President Emmanuel Macron has made that announcement, aiming to resolve the political gridlock in the country following, of course, that snap election in July. Barnier, who will now be tasked with pushing reforms and the 2025 French budget, of course, faces the challenge of working with a hung parliament in France. So that news just coming into us from the Reuters news agency. The EU's former Brexit negotiator, Michel Barnier, appointed as French Prime Minister. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'll be back with you in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hi there and welcome to the latest forecast for GB News from the Met Office. Cloudy for many of us today, very wet in the south and southwest, increasingly so. Very warm. Meanwhile, in the northwest, we've got low pressure over the near continent, an easterly airflow and weather fronts moving up and stalling across southern parts of the UK. So this blossoming area of rain across southern counties of England into South Wales, increasingly heavy and persistent as we head into the afternoon for parts of Hampshire, Dorset, Devon and Cornwall. And that could cause some issues, so a rain warning in force. Meanwhile, a lot of cloud across central and eastern parts, some drizzle and mist and low cloud for northeast England, eastern Scotland, but western Scotland, Northern Ireland, seeing plenty of sunshine. And over the next couple of days here, it's going to turn increasingly warm, almost like summer has arrived at last. But it's not the case for the southwest into the evening, with some very heavy rainfall for the evening rush, and that could cause some transport disruption for a time. As you can see, a lot of low cloud and some mist and drizzle for northeast England, eastern Scotland, western Scotland meanwhile, as well as Northern Ireland. A beautiful end to the day, plenty of blue skies before the sun goes down. And we're going to keep the clear skies in the northwest overnight. Northwest England and North Wales also seeing clear spells. But wherever you are, it's going to be a mild night because relatively humid air is arriving from the east. That's originating over Central Europe. So temperatures of 15 to 18 Celsius as we start off Friday. A fairly muggy night wherever you are. And another wet start to the day across the south and southwest. Some increasingly heavy rain once again, potentially causing issues on the roads first thing. That does ease a little into the afternoon, but there'll still be some damp weather around. Meanwhile, sunnier skies further north. Temperatures peaking in the mid to high 20s in the northwest.
The latest GB News travel.
The M62 has a lane closure and slow traffic in both directions due to an accident and a vehicle fire from 32A for the A1M interchange through to the Ferry Bridge services at 33. Clockwise on the M25, delays just before junction 15 for the M4 of around 10 minutes. It's also slow anti-clockwise on the M25 at the Dartford tunnels. Clockwise on the M25, an earlier accident at 20 for King's Langley to 21 has cleared. All lanes have reopened and traffic on the move. That's the same for the southbound side of the M1 before 12 for Flitwick. Finally, the eastbound side of the M27, there's a lane closure and slow traffic to a broken down vehicle at junction 5 for Southampton Airport. And that's your very latest travel news.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Hello and welcome back. Now, just wanted to read this very quick email out, a message from the school discussion and the VAT on private schools we're having now. Jenny, thank you very much for getting in touch. Jenny says, Dawn, special educational needs children and issues will be impacted by tax changes to private schools. My son is not attending school now due to my council's incompetence over his SEN provision. He needs a smaller setting like your friend's child. The impact of the tax changes is only going to make this much worse for special educational needs children who are already failed too much. So many people like that, so many children are being actually made to suffer because of this policy.
How much money will this policy actually raise by the time they've got to hire teachers to accommodate the new pupils that have left private school? And Paul says, Mark and Dawn, VAT on private education beggars belief. This will snare dance classes, night school classes and any event where fees are collected. Private education encompasses many societies that operate on subscriptions.
Children suffering, children suffering.
There you go.
Right, OK, let's move on, shall we? Priti Patel has become the first Tory MP to be voted out of the party's leadership contest, with former Immigration Minister Jenrick being the front runner.
Indeed, Jenrick topped the poll of MPs with 28 votes, with the other remaining contenders, Kemi Badenoch, James Cleverly, Tom Tugendhat and Mel Stride following behind.
We're now joined by Conservative MP for Central Suffolk and North Ipswich, Patrick Spencer. Patrick, thank you very much for joining us today. So, well, what do you make then? What do you make of the race so far?
I think it's been a really good race. As you said in my introduction, I'm a new MP, so I have not much to compare it to. I wasn't here during the last couple of leadership elections, and I didn't see what happened behind the scenes back then. But I can say that it's been good-hearted, thoughtful, really insightful. It's been collegiate. It's been helpful. for us backbench MPs, a good opportunity to get to know our colleagues, but get to know the people who are vying to be leader of the party. And it's been overwhelmingly positive. So far, so good. Obviously, the result last night was really interesting. I think it was great as a member of Team Tom that he got through to the next round. That was what we were aiming to do. It was always going to be super competitive, and with the reduced size of the parliamentary party, as we all know, it takes there are fewer votes between each of the candidates. So the distance between Rob and Tom is only 10 votes. So still lots to play for, still lots to fight for, still lots of discussions to be had. I know there's not a single MP who's resolutely decided on the future direction of the party and how we're going to get back. So there's still a lot to discuss and a lot to chew over.
What does Tom Tugendhat have, Patrick, that Kemi Badenoch and Robert Jenrick do not?
Well, for me, and this is the most important thing, on a day when we know next week we're going to be voting on the winter fuel allowance, when we're seeing the Labour government nationalise or aim to nationalise railways, there's going to be a vote on GB Energy. We need a leader who's going to make sure the Conservatives are elected back into government in 4 years' time. And Tom has the highest net favourability rating across the general public of any of the leadership candidates. And most importantly, he polls higher than the Labour leader himself. I think it's the most important thing. The purpose of the Conservative Party, what's made the Conservative Party so great over history, is that we win elections and we get things done in government. We need a leader who will appeal across the country, north, south, east, west, old, young, rich and poor. And I think Tom's the person to do it.
Dawn, does Tom Tugendhat set your pulse racing?
I'm afraid he doesn't, but none of you do, to be honest with you. Patrick, how does it feel, as you say, a backbencher MP, to have the vast majority of the country giving a bit of a shrug about who leads the Conservatives now?
Well, I'm not entirely sure that's true. I can understand, having just had a general election, having just spent the last couple of months knocking on doors across my constituency, people rightly and fairly at this point are a little bit tired of politics, certainly tired of Conservative politicians. I understand that. But actually, when I speak to my members, when I speak to my friends, many of them didn't vote Conservative, by the way. When I speak to people, they are interested to know who's going to lead the Conservative Party. No one, many people who have voted Conservative in the past but didn't this time round want to see a Conservative Party that's competitive against Labour. We're all united in the sense that Labour are not doing a very good job. So it's understandable that people probably want to take a little bit of a break from politics. That's why we're having quite a long process for this leadership campaign. But I don't buy the notion that people are just turning off completely.
4.5 years is a long time in politics, Patrick, as you know. Is it conceivable that whoever wins this race will be leading the party into the next general election, or do you think it's an interim post?
Well, I will talk for myself here. I think it is mad, bad and dangerous for anyone to think or suggest that who we elect later this year to be the leader will only be there for a couple of years and we can change them in the near term. If there's one thing we learned, and there's a lot we learned from the last couple of years, is chopping and changing our leaders goes down like it goes down very badly with the wider public.
Don't you think, though, that some of the candidates, Tom Tugendhat, obviously a very decent guy, military history, all the rest of it, but does he have the X factor? Don't you need someone like Kemi Badenoch that goes viral every 10 minutes, having fights with ultra-woke actors like David Tennant?
Kemi is a phenomenal communicator. She's a great brain. She's courageous. She's brave. She's right about a whole ton of stuff. I have no doubt she could win a general election. I'm just saying, looking at the evidence, speaking to people in my own association, members and voters in my patch, that Tom does have that X factor. He polls really well with different voter groups, and he, as the data suggests, is best placed not just to win, but to trounce Keir Starmer at the next election.
Patrick, just very quickly, how confident are you that the Tories will ever get back into power, given the number of votes that Reform have taken away from you?
Well, look, two things. First off, I know a lot of people who voted Reform didn't vote for Reform, they voted against the Conservative Party. And as many people voted for Reform as didn't vote at all. So they don't have, as much as I respect many of the things that that party may say about problems with the immigration system, they're very good at diagnosing problems. They haven't got a clue about solutions. No one voted for Reform because they genuinely thought Reform were going to form a government. They wanted to give the Conservatives a good kicking. They did that. We hear it. We've got to react. We've got to be better. We've got to do better, and we will.
Patrick Spencer, what a treat to have you on the show. We'll catch up soon. My thanks to the Conservative MP for Central Suffolk and North Ipswich, Patrick Spencer. I thought he was an interesting guy, that.
Very interesting. It must be very frustrating being on those back benches and knowing you've got such a small minority and seeing some of the things that, the government are doing.
I think, given Labour's current record in office, I think it's all to play for the Conservatives and potentially Reform UK at the next election, but that's a long time away.
It is a long time away, and that's the problem here. But how long can Labour carry on going, it's all their fault, it's all their fault, nothing to do with us, it's all their fault?
Yeah, you have to ask, don't you? Listen, folks, what is the best airport in the UK? What makes for a good airport? We'll put that to travel guru Simon Calder next.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
Stay-at-home dads, good or bad?
I personally think when you just have a baby, your hormones are all over the place, you're breastfeeding, to go back to work, I feel personally it's a big old thing. And I think babies really need their mums. On the other side, if a stay-at-home dad was a stay-at-home dad for years, I would also say, well, come on now, the children are in school. What's the issue? Why can't you go back to work?
It's really interesting because my husband's been a stay-at-home dad for 6 months and is working part-time. We both work part-time now. And that was always the choice that we were going to make. And it's been the best thing ever for my family. My husband and my daughter have the most incredible bond. He's much more practical, playful, and a better problem solver than me.
I mean, the problem I see, Annette, with all of this is that you do get a lot of women who say, we don't want the stereotype. We don't like the stereotypes. And when men say, well, actually, I want to be the parent staying at home and looking after the child, it's frowned upon. So you can't have it both ways.
I wouldn't say that's a long-term stay-at-home dad. And also, we're talking about actually dads should look after their children, and we shouldn't be praising them and say, oh, they're underappreciated for changing a nappy. That's their duty.
I think it takes real guts as a man to decide that you're going to give up those things that society deems so highly, even if it's for a short time.
Why is it then, Annette, that you say dads should go back to work?
I read an article about a dad who was a stay-at-home dad for 15 years, pursuing his hobbies and fitness and all that. Now, I just don't think that's fair.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
we were just joined by a Conservative MP, Patrick Spencer, and our viewers and listeners are not happy. Kay says, Patrick Spencer, you arrogant man. I voted Reform not to give the Tories a kick up the backside, but because I believe Reform are the only way forward. I did not want more of the same. We've had hundreds of messages of that flavour.
Lots of people saying that right now, but we move on because the UK's 29 best and worst airports for 2024 have been named by which? Simon Corder, travel guru supreme, is going to explain how this works. Why? Which one's top, which one's bottom? Simon, hello, good to see you.
Very nice to talk to you. Yes, I'm just escaping from the sun here to the shade in a bar in Hyères in France. Very nice it is too. But I've been studying with great interest this survey by which they have asked their readers, who I think are a quite particular group of people, what airports they like, what airports they don't like. And guess what? They really love Liverpool John Lennon Airport, they love London City Airport, and they love Norwich and other places such as Exeter and Inverness. And the places they really don't like are Manchester, particularly the old unreconstructed Terminal 3 and Terminal 1 at Manchester. They came at the bottom, and they're not particularly fond of Heathrow, Gatwick or Stansted or Luton either. But I'll tell you what, Dawn, when it comes to airports, it's, as the great French philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre said, enfer les autres. Hell is other people. And bluntly, none of the top 10 airports in the Which survey are in the top 10 airports in terms of number of passengers being handled. So it's, we much prefer places where you haven't got many other people, understandably, but I'm afraid aviation doesn't tend to work like that.
So small is beautiful, basically. London City, my favourite airport, is number 2 in the list. So what's the one thing that makes a really good airport, Simon?
Well, a really good question. So I would say security queues, and that's a key issue. And I'll tell you what's surprising is that Heathrow got really quite badly rated for security issues, except that Heathrow says, no, we get 99% of people through in under 10 minutes. It's fine. Birmingham did get a 1-star rating. They've had a pretty tough time this summer for security queues. But that's the great imponderable. They also, interestingly, in this survey said, well, what about check-in times? The time you're waiting at a check-in. And they use that to rate the airport, even though it is entirely the airline's decision.
The legendary travel correspondent of the independent newspaper,
in a
Simon
bar
Calder.
in the sun.
Of course he is. Always on holiday. Next up, Jeremy Kyle's in trouble. But first, the weather.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there and welcome to the latest forecast for GB News from the Met Office. Cloudy for many of us today, very wet in the south and southwest, increasingly so, very warm. Meanwhile, in the northwest, we've got low pressure over the near continent, an easterly airflow and weather fronts moving up and stalling across southern parts of the UK. So this blossoming area of rain across southern counties of England into South Wales, increasingly heavy and persistent as we head into the afternoon for parts of Hampshire, Dorset, Devon and Cornwall. And that could cause some issues, so a rain warning in force. Meanwhile, a lot of cloud across central and eastern parts, some drizzle and mist and low cloud for northeast England, eastern Scotland, but western Scotland, Northern Ireland, seeing plenty of sunshine. And over the next couple of days here, it's going to turn increasingly warm, almost like summer has arrived at last. But it's not the case for the southwest into the evening, with some very heavy rainfall for the evening rush, and that could cause some transport disruption for a time. As you can see, a lot of low cloud and some mist and drizzle for northeast England, eastern Scotland, western Scotland, meanwhile, as well as Northern Ireland, a beautiful end to the day, plenty of blue skies before the sun goes down. And we're going to keep the clear skies in the northwest overnight. Northwest England and North Wales also seeing clear spells. But wherever you are, it's going to be a mild night because relatively humid air is arriving from the east. That's originating over Central Europe. So temperatures of 15 to 18 Celsius as we start off Friday. a fairly muggy night wherever you are. And another wet start to the day across the south and southwest. Some increasingly heavy rain once again, potentially causing issues on the roads first thing. That does ease a little into the afternoon, but there'll still be some damp weather around. Meanwhile, sunnier skies further north, temperatures peaking in the mid to high 20s in the northwest.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
How would you like? Good luck. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is a big old headache because we talk a lot about GP appointments, don't we? But certainly almost everyone I know struggles to see a dentist when they need one.
Yes.
You know the best time to go to a dentist? When? 2:30. 2:30.
That's actually quite good. It's better than my gags.
The guy that went into Goa, to India, to get his dental treatment, is that what you're talking about?
Well, yeah, so tell us about that. I mean, this is how desperate people are to get treatment now. So what's the story?
OK, the story is a guy couldn't get an appointment at the NHS, so he went all the way to Goa in India to get his dental appointment. Now, I think he probably just wanted to go on holiday, and he thought, I know, why don't I go on holiday to Goa and then get my teeth done? Look, people are travelling in their droves. There's whole aeroplanes full of people with medical tourists. Like in Turkey, you get a whole aeroplane with people with hair implants and things like that.
Well,
yeah. I was going to go to
turkey teeth, isn't it?
Turkey teeth.
Turkey teeth. Well, now
that's when they strip the tooth down and you have these little pegs.
Yes, they strip them down. But in many cases, they strip them down far too low, so the nerve is exposed and it gets infected, and it's exposed to the elements. So you get infection in the tooth, and then you have to essentially take them all off. But by then, the infection spreads so far. I was getting my nails done the other day, which I don't do very often, and my nail technician said to me, "Is your dad still a dentist?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "Please, can I have an emergency appointment?" I went to Turkey and I got my teeth done, and now they look incredible, but I'm in so much pain. They're all infected. She had 15 taken out from the top and 12 from the bottom, and it's an absolute disaster. But this is what people are feeling like they have to do.
So medical tourism doesn't always work.
No, but it shows, doesn't it, Alex, that people can't get their teeth sorted here, so they go elsewhere. Listen, do you floss, by the way?
Don't floss. GB News, the People's Channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 1 o'clock on Thursday, the 5th of September. Here's Mark Dolan and I'm Dawn Neeson.
Now, the Chief Inspector of Prisons warns that risky criminals will be among nearly 2,000 offenders released early next week, saying authorities are simply not prepared. We'll be getting the thoughts of a former prison minister.
And Jeremy Kyle has arrived at court to give evidence at an inquest into the death of a man who died after appearing on his TV show. We're outside the court with all the details for you.
And a proposed crackdown on water company bosses who could face years in prison for not controlling the sewage flowing into our waterways. Could the plans put an end to the flow of filth being pumped into our rivers? Yes, indeed, and we want to hear from you throughout the show. gbnews.com/your say. Lots to get through, but first, the news headlines and Sam Francis.
Very good afternoon to you. It is exactly 1 minute past 1, and the top story this lunchtime. The Crown Prosecution Service says it has dropped 2 indecent assault charges against Harvey Weinstein. It was alleged the disgraced Hollywood producer had assaulted a woman now aged in her 50s in 1996 in London. However, the Special Crime Division, which continually reassesses cases, has said today it found no realistic chance of conviction. In a statement, the Crown Prosecution Service have reiterated their commitment to prosecuting sexual assault cases and encourage any potential victims to come forward and to report to police. Water bosses could face up to 2 years in jail under new laws aimed at cracking down on pollution in England's rivers, seas and lakes. The government claims the new water bill gives regulators more powers to fine executives or face time behind bars if they fail to protect water quality. Meanwhile, the government has admitted that not all buildings with the same dangerous cladding as Grenfell Tower have been identified. That follows the damning report published yesterday. The Prime Minister has pledged to review all 58 recommendations from the Grenfell inquiry, with a full response expected within 6 months. The report heavily criticised various firms, and families and survivors are now calling for swift punishment for those found at fault. Meanwhile, the Met Police are continuing to investigate potential criminal charges, which could take between 12 and 18 months. Detectives investigating the murder of a top chef attacked near Notting Hill Carnival have released these images of 16 potential witnesses. Museum Netu from Dubai was found unconscious with a head injury in Queensway and sadly died 4 days later. One man has been charged, but detectives are still piecing together the 41-year-old's movements from earlier that day. And the Met's Specialist Crime Command is now urging anyone who may recognise the people in the images to come forward, saying they believe the individuals may have vital information. A 14-year-old boy has appeared in court charged with murdering an 8-year-old grandfather in Leicestershire. Bim Coley, who died from a neck injury while walking his dog, was just seconds away from home at the time. The boy, who can't be named, has been remanded in custody and is appearing at Leicester Crown Court this afternoon. An urgent appeal has been launched to find a 10-month-old girl who's gone missing with her father. Merseyside police are asking the public to help find Layla Rose Wheeler, who was last seen in the area of Wallasey Village in Wirral. A spokesman from the force said there is concern for both of their welfare and described Layla as a girl with short blonde hair and blue eyes. TV host Jeremy Kyle has arrived at Winchester Coroner's Court to give evidence at an inquest into the death of Steve Diamond, who died after appearing on The Jeremy Kyle Show in 2019. The 63-year-old from Portsmouth reportedly took his own life just a week after failing a lie detector test on the programme, which accused him of cheating on his partner. The inquest has revealed so far that Diamond had a history of mental health issues, including multiple attempts to take his own life, and had been rejected initially by the show due to depression. Well, despite the findings, he was later allowed to appear on the programme, providing a GP's letter. Royal Mail could ditch Saturday deliveries for second-class post as part of an overhaul of the UK's postal service, and that's now under review by the regulator Ofcom. The plan would see second-class post delivered on alternate weekdays, but first-class post would remain for 6 days a week. Ofcom, which has been consulting on those changes since January of this year, is hoping to finalise its decision by the summer of 2025. Royal Mail argues the current setup is no longer workable, and it says it's pushing for urgent reform. Well, let's turn to some international news now. And in France, the former EU Brexit negotiator Michel Barnier has been appointed as Prime Minister. President Emmanuel Macron made the announcement in a bid to resolve the political gridlock after the summer's snap election in France. At 73, Barnier will be the oldest Prime Minister in France's modern political history and takes over from Gabriel Attal, who was the youngest. To the US, where students, families and teachers have gathered to remember the victims of a mass school shooting just weeks after classes began. A 14-year-old boy, described by police there as pure evil, killed 2 students and 2 teachers at his high school in Georgia. Colt Gray also injured 9 others with a semi-automatic rifle before he surrendered to police. Authorities have now confirmed that he had been questioned last year over online threats, but acted alone in this attack. He will be charged and tried as an adult. And finally, some sad news from the world of sport. The Olympic marathon runner Rebecca Cheptegei has died after being set on fire by her boyfriend. That's according to the head of Uganda's Olympic Committee. The 33-year-old, who competed just weeks ago in Paris, sadly suffered burns to over 75% of her body in that attack. She's the 3rd female athlete killed in the country since 2021. The Ugandan president has called it cowardly and senseless and has condemned violence against women. Those are the latest headlines for now. Your next update from me in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you very much, Sam. Now, lots of you, really lots of you are getting in touch. And it's very simple to do, right? gbnews.com/your say. We love hearing from you. It's my personal favourite part of the show, is talking to you lot out there. But lots of you are getting very angry about what our Conservative MP Patrick Spencer had to say about people actually voting against the Tories, not actually voting for reform. Lots of people are very angry about this. Dubbing Needle, interesting name, says Conservatives like Patrick Spencer are in denial about the reality of the reform movement. Sweeping assumptions don't make him right.
Indeed. Janet, who's a GB News member, says, Mark and Dawn, I'm now a reform voter, as they have more drive and determination and are not scared to say how it is. Now, Dawn, we're hearing endlessly from Tory MPs that it's the oldest political party in Europe, the most successful, the natural party of government. Well, as they demonstrated in July, they're now the natural party of opposition. And this Tory leadership debate has ignored the elephant in the room, which is Nigel Farage and Reform UK. Ignore reform at their peril. I don't think the Conservatives can win another election without a deal with Reform UK.
It'll be very interesting, won't it? I think they need to take it seriously, and I think they still have the arrogance that many of our mainstream political parties have.
Well, I heard a Tory insider yesterday saying that the Conservatives shouldn't chase the reform vote. Well, wait a minute. That's 4.1 million votes. They cannot get back into power without those votes.
The interesting thing, I think, now, will Priti Patel actually jump ship and go to reform?
Well,
and should she?
You mean Suella?
Suella Braverman, sorry. And should she?
And Priti.
Yeah, and Priti.
And
any
David
of them,
Davis.
Any of them.
And all of them. And Rishi.
Yes.
They'd be wise not to.
But no, Priti. I mean, Priti now is out of the election leadership race.
Yeah, it's all possible, isn't it? But anyway, viewers and listeners furious about the idea that those who've voted for Reform UK were simply punishing the Tories.
So now we move on. TV host Jeremy Kyle arrived at Winchester Coroner's Court earlier to give evidence at an inquest into the death of Steve Dimmond, who died after appearing on the Jeremy Kyle Show in 2019.
The 63-year-old from Portsmouth reportedly took his own life just a week after failing a lie detector test on the show, which accused him of cheating on his partner.
Joining us now for the latest on this is our national reporter, Charlie Peters. Charlie, thank you very much for joining us today. So we've seen Jeremy Kyle actually arrive at the inquiry today. What's happening now? Bring us up to date on what's happening.
Well, Jeremy, we expect, will be giving evidence later this afternoon, probably from about 2 p.m. But this is the third day now of the full inquest, expected to end early next week. And this morning, we've heard more evidence in the witness box from Chris Whiston, who is the former head of content compliance at ITV. And he's been going through the process for the lie detector test on the Jeremy Kyle Show. Now, previously, when I was at the court on Tuesday, we heard that Steve Diamond, the 63-year-old who is suspected to have taken his life, was desperate to take that lie detector test in order to prove to his then partner, who'd rekindled his relationship with Jane Callaghan, that he had not cheated on her. The inquest heard that he'd called up maybe 40 to 50 times to demonstrate how keen he was to take that test. But this morning, Chris Whiston, the head of compliance at ITV at the time, he had told the hearing yesterday that his first application, Mr Diamond's application, was rejected because he had a history of antidepressants. He produced a note from his GP to say that he was no longer taking those. This morning, the inquest was shown clips of Mr Diamond being advised about how the lie detector test was work. A contractor who manages that test was speaking to him. And Mr Diamond asked whether the test was 99.9% accurate, and he was told it's about 95% accurate. But if you get one answer wrong, you failed a lot. That was the quote that the inquest heard today. Now, Mr Whiston said that a researcher had phoned Mr Diamond the day after he appeared on the programme. That was never aired, that episode, to tell him that counselling was being arranged for him. But he added, sadly, because of Mr Diamond's death, that didn't go ahead. The inquest also heard that one member of the show sent another message to a colleague about Mr Diamond during the filming day saying, Could be emotion in his part. He has tears in his eyes. Lol. Well, Neil Sheldon, the KC, who's representing Jeremy Kyle, put some questions to Mr. Whiston in the witness box. He asked him if he'd seen any evidence that the presenter had adjusted his approach when dealing with Mr. Diamond, his approach or presenting style. He said no, but he also agreed with Mr. Sheldon that Mr. Kyle was responsive to adapting his approach if he felt it necessary. So potentially interesting that he didn't choose to do so on this occasion with the information available to Jeremy Kyle. We expect he'll give evidence from 2 p.m. today.
Do we have any idea of what he's going to say, how he's going to play this?
No, there's not been any kind of pre-expectation or release from him on this situation. But I have to say, when I was at the inquest on Tuesday, we heard from Mr. Diamond's estranged son and that former partner Jane Callahan, and there are some legal big beasts in the room questioning those who come to the inquest box. This is not a standard coroner's court experience. So Jeremy Kyle will be under questions not only from his own lawyer, but also from ITV and others.
Most definitely. And you have to say that these shows are very exploitative. You don't need an inquiry like this into the tragic death of this man to understand that you put vulnerable people on TV with complicated private lives and you make millions off the back of it. So do you think ITV have a case to answer here, or at least the production company?
Well, they have their own representatives in the court to defend their position. They've pointed to the fact that Mr. Diamond had potentially some experience of mental health problems before the programme was aired, so linking the suspected taking of his own life not necessarily to the programme itself. But fundamentally, the show hasn't been aired since this tragedy in 2019.
I mean, Dawn, do you think those shows were unethical? Because we watched them with great amusement back in the day, didn't we? And it was great student TV, mid-morning, you're just waking up, you've got a hangover, put on Jeremy Kyle.
I must admit I wasn't a fan. I always felt for the people that were on there, I didn't like the way they were treated. So it'd be very interesting to hear what Jeremy Kyle has to say this afternoon.
Yeah, and what about the implications for Kyle's career, do you think?
Well, he's previously said that he was cancelled before he took his most recent job at a rival station that's no longer broadcasting on linear television. But we'll see what evidence he might give later this afternoon.
OK, brilliant. Charlie, thank you so much. There you go, our national reporter, Charlie Peters. Now, the prisons watchdog has warned that risky criminals will be released from jail next week under the government's early release scheme.
The Chief Inspector of Prisons says the authorities lack the right levels of preparation to deal with the scheme, as many prisoners will be released without a home to go to.
Now, I think this is a very bad start for our new government, I've got to say. I mean, they're pursuing net zero with sort of some kind of messianic zeal. They are taking pensioners' winter fuel payments away from them. They're going to shiver this winter, and now the streets are not going to be safe. I mean, how do you feel if you're, you know, just sort of waking up next week to the news that 2,000 dangerous criminals effectively released early?
Yeah, and this is not just us having concerns here. I mean, Charlie Taylor, the Chief Inspector of Prisons, has said that, you know, that we're not prepared for this to happen.
Yeah.
And he said an estimated 1,700 prisoners were released on Tuesday, almost twice the number released in a week. And they will literally be standing on a station outside the prison, a train station, and going, what do I do now? Where do I go? And many of these will be released into homelessness, and because of that, they'll be significantly more likely to breach their licence conditions, break curfews, restrictions, and they're more likely to return to drug and alcohol addictions. This just doesn't sound safe, does it, for anyone, for the released prisoners and for the public?
Most definitely. And, of course, this is a long-term systemic issue. You can't lay this at the door of Keir Starmer, who has just got into number 10. But there is amazing competition for our resources now. You know, the country's running a deficit, which means that more's going out than comes in every month. We've got a national debt. Every department wants cash. But actually, what is the biggest priority? Well, I think it's our borders and it's safety on the streets. You know, when it comes to policing and prisons, I don't think these are departments that should be cut back. I think it's money, no object, Dawn.
Many, many people who are watching and listening now, whenever we have this conversation, say, why don't we simply deport the foreign prisoners who are clogging up our jail cells at the moment? And there are around, I believe, 10,000 of them. So it would certainly solve a problem with freeing up prison spaces. But we are where we are at the moment. That's not going to happen. So what the other issue that's being raised is Labour's plans to press ahead with the previous government's prison building scheme, which is fine, But the prisons union and probation service are once again warning that there isn't the staff to man these prisons.
No, well, that's it.
So,
that's why I say that the country has got to make some tough choices. You know, we need sound borders. We need prisons that have capacity, and we need more cops, and we need safe streets. That is actually a civil right that we have in this country. We pay our taxes, and what are we getting for that? We're getting terrible local services, we're getting unsafe streets, and cops, the ones who are on duty, don't seem confident in the law to be able to actually police the law itself.
But you'll never guess what a spokesperson for the Ministry of Justice said when we put this question to them, that it was dangerous, so many prisoners was going to be released on Tuesday with no homes to go to. They said, can you guess? They said, the new government inherited a justice system in crisis with prisons on the point of collapse. In other words, it's not our fault, Gov, it's all theirs.
Well, it is their problem now, and they've got to tackle it, because being safe in this country is absolutely critical. Otherwise, why do we pay our taxes?
Good question. And a lot of them as well, which are going to go up probably come the budget.
Most definitely. Now, a tourist who was spotted climbing to the summit of Germany's highest mountain in sandals has been branded stupid. Well, I'd agree with that.
Which is a fairly fair comment. Footage shows the man without any proper equipment and use a ladder to climb up. There you can see footage there, and you can see, indeed, that is really not suitable footwear for anywhere apart from a beach.
Yeah, those are those expensive Birkenstock sandals, aren't they? Yeah, I think so. Now, experts were furious, saying it is just stupid. These people are not real mountaineers. Now, as luck would have it, Dawn, you're a bit of an outdoorsy type.
I used to, yeah, I still am an outdoors type, but I used to actually go proper mountaineering, and I can ice climb. And I have some horrific experiences of people literally wandering up snow-covered mountains, right? I've got full gear on, mountaineering boots, ice axe, crampons, in flip-flops, and I'm not even making this up. And I've got friends that work in the mountain rescue up in Scotland, and they are constantly telling me of people that wander up into the hills woefully ill-equipped with, and they don't even check the weather mark.
Yeah, indeed.
It's just dangerous.
And then the problem is it's up to the authorities to rescue these numpties at enormous expense. Well, I think when they need to be rescued, it's they that should foot the bill, whether it's a helicopter or some kind of airlift situation. Honestly, people have got no common sense these days. I'm a stickler for footwear. There's an absolute blight on our society, a scourge at the moment, and it's something called a slider. Do you know what a slider is?
Well, it's like a flip-flop without the thing between the toes.
That's right. I mean, it's the kind of thing that you would expect someone to wear at a spa or a swimming pool. I saw some school kids the other day, and they're in their uniform with sliders. How that's allowed at the school, I don't know. And the other day, I was offered a lift by somebody who's wearing sliders, and I said, I'm not getting in that car if you're wearing those things.
They are dangerous. You know the amount of people that have accidents trying to drive cars in flip-flops.
Come on, folks, let's go back to having... Can we have more cops on the streets? Can we police our borders? And can we have proper shoes again?
Ban sliders and flip-flops, what do you reckon?
Yeah, I think hiking boots all year round should be a national law. If only I was in charge.
Yeah, I'm just looking at your shoes now, but I'm not going to make you show people because I don't hate you enough out there, by the way.
It's not pretty.
No, it's not pretty. OK, well, this is Good Afternoon Britain, and it's GB News, and there's loads more coming up on today's show. The shocking story of the family of an aspiring Marine murdered by an asylum seeker accused authorities of sweeping his death under the carpet after the coroner scraps his inquest.
Absolute disgrace, isn't it? We'll tackle that next. You will be so angry.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
Meghan Markle is finding it very, very difficult to recruit staff for her lifestyle brand, which is called American Riviera Orchard. There's a mouthful for you. Apart from a jam gifted to influencers earlier this year, the brand is yet to launch any products.
Well, let's speak to our US royal and showbiz reporter, Kinsey Schofield. Good morning to you, Kinsey. Who's going to want that gig?
I mean, there are rumors that Netflix has said, allow us to manage the retail strategy. If she can't manage to find a CEO or somebody willing to work with her, Netflix sees an opportunity there.
To be an influencer, people have got to want to be like you. Do people like her?
I mean, this has been her biggest issue in the last few years, is realizing that there's been a shift when it comes to their popularity. Harry and Meghan believed their own hype when they said on that Netflix series that the reason they were ostracized was because they were much more popular than the British royals. They were more popular than Prince William, more popular than Princess Kate. And their popularity has declined immensely. And now they are desperate to win people over again.
Most people have to be liked or admired, and I put it to you, Kinsey, she'll have difficulty on both fronts.
Netflix is not going to renew this contract. I mean, they are fearful that this cooking show, this polo show, will not connect with the audience. And now they want us to believe that Meghan is at home cooking all this banana bread and having her best friend Chrissy Teigen over for scones. People aren't going to buy it.
GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking,
this is the nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello, welcome back. The Home Office has scrapped an inquest into how an asylum seeker posed a child to enter the UK before murdering an aspiring Marine.
The then 19-year-old Afghan national had previously shot 2 migrants in Serbia before lying about his age to enter the country.
He then murdered 21-year-old Tom Roberts, whose family have now accused the Home Office of systemic failures that allowed the criminal into the country so easily.
We're now joined by immigration lawyer Ivan Sampson. Ivan, thank you so much for joining us. How was this able to happen?
Well, the Home Office has a policy for assessing age. Well, first of all, he claimed asylum. That's why he was able to get into the country. But in respect to his age, the policy is that they make a visual assessment of a person's age and also his mannerisms. And if that shows him to be significantly more than 18, and that's all we know what that means is several years above 18, then he's assessed as an adult, otherwise he isn't. Now, you'd think that would favour asylum seekers. That's not the case, because the Helen Bamber Foundation 2022 did a survey on age assessments by the Home Office. And what they found was that 97% of the case, it actually went the other way, where the Home Office assessed a person to be an adult when in fact he was or she was a minor. And there's a duty under the Borders Act for the Home Office to safeguard the welfare and well-being of children. And that's a statutory duty which they have to abide by. So I'm afraid the system isn't working. I think technology can come into this. There are ways you can assess age looking at someone's teeth. So, and that's done in criminal matters, for example. So, I think there's got to be re-look at the way the Home Office assess age. But in this case, it wouldn't have made any difference because we don't have a returns policy with Afghanistan anyway. So even if he'd been assessed as an adult, and even if he'd been a failed asylum seeker, we couldn't have returned him to Afghanistan. It's as simple as that.
But he had travelled through other European countries to get here, and indeed, he'd previously shot 2 migrants with a Kalashnikov rifle in Serbia whilst trying to make his way across Europe to get to the UK. This is just proof that our asylum system is utterly broken, isn't it?
Well, look, we have undocumented people coming into our country. We have no idea about their previous background, whether they're of suitable character or not. And a recent report by Professor Tom Brooks of Durham University, what he said was this: there's definitely a connection between Brexit and the number of asylum seekers crossing the Channel. Before Brexit, this wasn't a problem. So what happened? The gangs, when they realised that there isn't a returns agreement post-Brexit, soon realised that even if you're a failed asylum seeker, there's nothing that a government can do unless they have a returns agreement with that country. Now, the 5 countries which make up 90% of our asylum claims, we don't have a returns agreement with them. So what Professor Brooks found is that there was a failure on the part of the government at the time, the Conservatives, for not having a returns agreement similar to the Dublin Convention that was in place at the time of Brexit. So really, we need to have a returns agreement with the EU again, and that needs to be enforced, EU treaty, with the French being forced to abide by it or face heavy fines and court action if they don't.
Ivan, are you implying, forgive me if I'm wrong here, that if we hadn't have had Brexit, this wouldn't be happening?
No, I'm not applying anything. I'm telling you what the research done by Professor Brooks of Durham University. He said that. There was a clear connection. Because you see, before Brexit, we weren't having these conversations about boat, asylum, and people coming across the Channel. This wasn't a problem. There was still a problem with trucks and lorries, but technology sorted that out. But as soon as the traffickers realised that we couldn't return people, there was a business model to be had, and they had it, and they're making a lot of money from it.
How much of this, Ivan, is a question of resource?
Well, I think look, I deal with the Home Office on a day-to-day basis. In court on Tuesday, rather, the quality of my opponents is really poor. The training is poor. The systems don't help the Home Office. The way they assess asylum claims don't help them. We need a better system. We need properly trained immigration officers and specialists to look at these asylum claims who are familiar with country information. A lot of it's all on credibility and plausibility. And really, they're not properly trained. And there's a massive leakage of staff in the Home Office, because as they're training them, more people are leaving and they're having to recruit more. So we've got to either pay people more, get a better caliber of person assessing these claims, and perhaps use professionals doing that. I think that would be a good idea.
If a violent asylum seeker like this individual that committed this appalling murder can't be deported and can only be deported with a returns agreement, doesn't that tell us that the law is an ass?
Well, you say he can't be deported. Well, he can. The law's very strong on deportation. So if anyone commits an offence which carries more than 12 months imprisonment, the Home Office has a statutory duty to issue a deportation notice. Now, even if we get the appeal process is exhausted and that person goes through that system, we're still left with that person in this country because there's no returns agreement.
Sorry, Ivan, I'm a bit confused. Because originally you said we couldn't send him back, we couldn't deport him because he was from Afghanistan. Understandably, that country is an absolute hellhole. But you're saying now that we could deport him?
No, I didn't say that. What I said was the law allows us to deport him. It's an automatic deportation, and the longer the sentence, if it's more than 4 years, the balance tips in favour of the state. The lower the sentence, the balance tips in favour of the individual, depending on their particular human right, whether they've got a child, a partner, so forth. So those human rights elements, the rights that individuals have, they diminish the longer the sentence. It's very hard. I mean, I'll be honest with you, the Home Office are good at deportation. I mean, you may not believe it, but we deport the vast majority of people. About 70% of criminals are deported.
But we couldn't deport him back to Afghanistan, so where would we send him back to?
Well, you can't. We could, because there's no way to do it. I think it was done back in the 1800s when we sent people to Australia. So, unless we do something like that, I mean, there's no way. We're stuck with these people.
Or how about a returns agreement to a third safe country? Wouldn't that be a nice idea?
Like Rwanda?
Well, you should stop it in the first place. So as soon as he came here and claimed asylum, we should have sent him straight back to France, which we could have done prior to Brexit.
Yeah.
I'm not so sure, but our thanks to immigration lawyer Ivan Sampson. Thank you, Ivan. We'll catch up again in the near future.
I'm sorry, I have more questions than I started out with. This is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News, and there's lots more coming up on the show today. Priti Patel out of the Tory leadership race. Robert Jenrick takes pole position with Kemi Badenoch just behind. The latest on the runners and riders after your latest news headlines with Sam Francis.
Very good afternoon to you from the newsroom 132 and the top stories this lunchtime. The Crown Prosecution Service says it has dropped 2 indecent assault charges against Harvey Weinstein. It was alleged the disgraced Hollywood producer had assaulted a woman, now in her 50s, in 1996. However, the Special Crime Division, which continually reassesses cases, says it's found no realistic chance of conviction. In a statement, the Crown Prosecution Service have also reiterated their commitment to prosecuting sexual assault cases and encouraging any potential victims to come forward and report to police. Water bosses could face up to 2 years in jail under new laws aimed at cracking down on pollution in England's rivers, seas and lakes. The government claims its new water bill would give regulators more power to fine executives or face time behind bars if they fail to protect water quality. Meanwhile, the government's admitted that not all buildings with the same dangerous cladding as Grenfell Tower have been identified. That follows the damning findings published this week. The Prime Minister has pledged to review all 58 recommendations from the Grenfell inquiry, with a full response due within 6 months. The report heavily criticised various building firms and construction companies. Families and survivors are now calling for swift punishment for those found at fault. Meanwhile, the Met Police are continuing their investigation into potential criminal charges, which could take up to 18 months. TV host Jeremy Kyle has been at Winchester Coroner's Court today, giving evidence at an inquest into the death of Steve Diamond, who died after appearing on The Jeremy Kyle Show in 2019. The 63-year-old from Portsmouth reportedly took his own life just a week after failing a lie detector test on that programme. The inquest has revealed that Diamond had a history of mental health issues, including multiple suicide attempts, and had been rejected initially by the show. Despite those findings, though, he was later allowed to appear on the programme after providing a GP letter. In France, the EU's former Brexit negotiator, Michel Barnier, has been appointed as Prime Minister this afternoon. President Emmanuel Macron made the announcement in a bid to resolve the political gridlock in the country after his summer snap election. At 73, Barnier will be the oldest Prime Minister in France's modern political history, taking over from Gabriel Attal, who was the youngest. And finally, just some breaking developments from Munich in Germany. The suspect in the shooting this morning, we now know, has been identified as an 18-year-old Austrian national living in Austria. That suspect, who died at the scene this morning, was shot while exchanging fire with police. In the last few minutes, the German State Interior Minister has confirmed the attack was initially planned on the Israeli consulate in Munich, though they say the motive is still to be established. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Sam Francis. Your next full roundup at 2 o'clock.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Well, let's take a look at the markets for you this afternoon. The pound will buy you $1.3171 and 1.186 euros. The price of gold, £1,911 and 64 pence per ounce. And the FTSE 100 is at 8,257 points.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Hi there and welcome to the latest forecast for GB News from the Met Office. Cloudy for many of us today, very wet in the south and southwest, increasingly so, very warm. Meanwhile, in the northwest, we've got low pressure over the near continent, an easterly airflow and weather fronts moving up and stalling across southern parts of the UK. So this blossoming area of rain across southern counties of England into South Wales, increasingly heavy and persistent as we head into the afternoon for parts of Hampshire, Dorset, Devon and Cornwall. And that could cause some issues, so a rain warning in force. Meanwhile, a lot of cloud across central and eastern parts, some drizzle and mist and low cloud for northeast England, eastern Scotland, but western Scotland, Northern Ireland, seeing plenty of sunshine. And over the next couple of days here, it's going to turn increasingly warm, almost like summer has arrived at last. But it's not the case for the southwest into the evening, with some very heavy rainfall for the evening rush, and that could cause some transport disruption for a time. As you can see, a lot of low cloud and some mist and drizzle for northeast England, eastern Scotland, western Scotland meanwhile, as well as Northern Ireland. A beautiful end to the day, plenty of blue skies before the sun goes down. And we're going to keep the clear skies in the northwest overnight. Northwest England and North Wales also seeing clear spells. But wherever you are, it's going to be a mild night because relatively humid air is arriving from the east. That's originating over Central Europe. So temperatures of 15 to 18 Celsius as we start off Friday. A fairly muggy night wherever you are. And another wet start to the day across the south and southwest. Some increasingly heavy rain once again, potentially causing issues on the roads first thing. That does ease a little into the afternoon, but there'll still be some damp weather around. Meanwhile, sunnier skies further north. Temperatures peaking in the mid to high 20s in the northwest.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon. Hello to you. I'm Jules Buckley. Let's go to the M62 firstly. From the A1M interchange, that's junction 32 through towards the Ferry Bridge services. That's junction 33. A lane shut both ways. The outside lane is coned off. There's been a collision and a vehicle fire there. A southbound M61 from Horwich, junction 6 to West Horton. At junction 5 is part blocked. A collision there is starting to cause queues. A vehicle undergoing a tyre change. This is the southbound M6 slow going. A lane shut. Sandbach and Crewe at 17, down towards Stoke at junction 16. Heading into London for the M4 from the Heston services towards the Brentford turn-off at junction 2. And it's down to one lane at the start of the elevated section there. There's a broken down car, naturally causing queues on the approaches. And for now, that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Hello, Mark and Dawn with you on GB News. Good afternoon, Britain. Now, Priti Patel has become the first Tory MP to be voted out of the party's leadership contest, with former Immigration Minister Robert Jenrick emerging as the front-runner.
Former Immigration Minister Robert Jenrick topped the poll of MPs with 28 votes, with the other remaining contenders, Kemi Badenoch, James Cleverly, Tom Duggan and Mel Stride, following behind.
Well, let's get reaction from, forgive me there, do you know something? It's a well-oiled machine, this, isn't it? Live telly, folks. We're joined by GB News' political correspondent Olivia Utley. Olivia, are we surprised by the dispatching of Priti Patel at this stage in the contest?
I don't think we are particularly surprised. It hasn't looked for a while as though she's had the momentum to see her through. She's been seen as a bit of a has-been, if you like, for quite a long time now. What perhaps is surprising is that none of the other 5 candidates managed to achieve even 25% of the vote. The contest really is still wide open. Kemi Badenoch came in second place with 22 votes. We're talking about such small numbers here because the Conservative Parliamentary Party is just so small now, and that was only 5 or 6 votes ahead of Mel Stride, who came in 5th place. So, as I say, there is a lot to play for still. Robert Jenrick does seem to be emerging as the favourite among MPs, but Kemi Badenoch for the moment is very much the favourite among Conservative Party members, who will get to decide when it gets to the final 2. She has about twice the support of Robert Jenrick. The thing is, she's not that popular among MPs, Conservative MPs in Westminster, and it's just possible that those Priti Patel voters vote as a block in the next round, which we're expecting on Tuesday, in a sort of anyone but Kemi manoeuvre. So it could could be that Kemi Badenoch is wiped out before it goes to the members.
Olivia,
if Conservative MPs decide that they don't want her to be their leader.
What is it about Kemi Badenoch that some Tory backbenchers don't like?
Well, when I speak to Conservative MPs, it doesn't seem to be a problem with her politics or the way she presents herself in the House of Commons. She seems to be a pretty good Commons performer. It's more that behind closed doors, she doesn't really sort of work the tea room. She's perhaps not particularly amiable with her colleagues. She also has a little bit of a record for lashing out at journalists who she feels are being unfair to her and snapping a bit in select committees, etc. So the idea that she perhaps isn't that kind of an amenable a character is posing a little bit of a problem among Conservative MPs. Weirdly, that might not be such a problem if she were Prime Minister, but as the leader of a very small opposition, it's necessary to sort of butter people up, get journalists on your side, talk to as many people as possible. And some Conservative MPs I've spoken to said that perhaps she isn't the person for that job.
So, Olivia, who are Priti Patel's supporters going to put their weight behind now?
Well, that is the big question. I mean, it is possible. Priti Patel's supporters generally, we assume, are relatively from the right wing of the party, to put it very bluntly. And obviously that is a bit of a sweeping generalisation. So I think we can relatively safely assume that they probably won't go for Tom Tugendhat, probably won't go for Mel Stride either. It could be that as a bloc they vote for Robert Jenrick. I don't think they'll vote for Kemi Badenoch, mainly because Kemi Badenoch was obviously more popular than Priti Patel in this round. They're quite similar in terms of their politics. I don't know why you would vote for Priti if not and not Kemi, unless you had a reason to dislike Kemi, if you see what I mean. So my instinct is they will probably move towards Robert Jenrick, or they might split their vote and try and eliminate Kemi from these rounds altogether, because there are people who don't want her in the final two. What we can be pretty certain of is if she is in the final two, she will probably win.
Olivia, just quickly, our viewers are getting very, very annoyed about the Tory politician we were interviewing earlier on. Patrick Spencer, who said that a vote for people were voting against the Conservatives, not for reform. Lots and lots of people are very angry about that. Do you think the Conservatives are even vaguely aware that they have an issue with the Reform Party and that people were voting for reform, not just against the Conservatives?
Well, I think that's a really interesting question. I think Conservative MPs see this very, very differently, depending mostly on where their constituencies are and what happened in their own constituencies. In the sort of southeast and southwest of England, lots of Conservative seats either went over to the Lib Dems. The Lib Dems won all but one of the constituencies that they targeted in this election. They won 72 seats, a really, really strong performance, and they came very close second in lots of Conservative constituencies in the southeast and the southwest.
Olivia,
I think those Conservative MPs are less worried.
Let me interrupt you in favour of our next king. That is, of course, the Prince of Wales, Prince William, who is pictured live in southwest London and promoting a cause close to his heart, which is homelessness. He's visiting the Saatchi Gallery, which is an art gallery in central London, to view a show called Homelessness Reframed, a groundbreaking exhibition which brings to life the breadth and complexities of homelessness in this country.
And we can see him... No, it's... Oh, we've already seen him, right? OK, so we don't see him anymore. And obviously, he's on his own.
It's a worthy cause.
It is a very worthy cause, and lots of people were hoping and speculating around on today that Catherine might be joining him.
Yeah.
Because it's a cause very close to her heart as well. But,
well, of course.
Sadly, not as the case.
Prior to her cancer diagnosis, we were told that we wouldn't see her until after Easter, and it's now September, and we do, of course, wish her well. Yeah. Olivia, can we come back to you over in our Westminster studio? And a development in Paris. France has a new Prime Minister and a familiar name to our viewers and listeners.
Yes, the new Prime Minister is Michel Barnier, that famous villain, if you like, of the Brexit debates. He was the negotiator on behalf of the EU and drove a very, very hard bargain with Theresa May. Having him as the French Prime Minister is bound to ruffle quite a lot of pro-Brexit feathers over here because this government, the British government, will now have to be negotiating on a day-to-day basis with Michel Barnier. That could be a really uncomfortable relationship. That said, French politics is pretty chaotic at the moment. That snap election a few weeks ago led to a three-way split in the main parties in the Elysée, and it now looks possible that Michel Barnier might not get through the very first hurdle, might not get over the very first hurdle. In the next couple of weeks, he could be voted out in a vote of no confidence. So Brexiteers shouldn't get too upset yet. We don't yet know how this is going to play out.
Yeah.
But yes, it could be a very tricky position for Britain.
He might get thrown out, but he'll just ask for a second vote, won't he? Or maybe best of three. Olivia, thank you so much. Great to catch up. We'll speak soon. GB News' political correspondent, Olivia Utley.
Thank you.
Now, listen, we've been talking about, does anyone care about the Tory leadership? OK. And I understand that it is the dullest. I mean, Director Tom said he's bored to tears about this.
It's dull, but I think it's only dull because we've got 4.5 years to go.
Indeed.
Before they can do anything.
Well, right, but if Labour keep going at this rate, then whoever becomes the new leader of the Conservative Party is likely to be our next Prime Minister, and that's why I think it matters.
I don't think you're right. I actually think whoever becomes...
How dare you disagree with me?
I think whoever becomes leader now will not be leading the Conservative Party into the next election.
Oh, so do you see the next appointment as some kind of interim option?
Steadying the ship.
All right.
Steadying the ship, and then I think in the run-up to the next election, they get a firebrand populist in.
And what do you make of these politicians that go on a journey? I mean, Liz Truss was...
I hate anyone going on a journey, to be honest with you.
Too right. Liz Truss was an anti-monarchist Lib Dem. Robert Jenrick was basically a kind of David Cameron acolyte on the left of the party, OK?
Yes.
A woke Tory. Now he's Mr. Immigration. Are you buying that?
No, I'm not buying anything any of them say, to be honest with you, Mark. I think, like a lot of you out there, and please do let me know, gbnews.com/your say. I don't buy what any of them are saying now. I had high hopes for the Labour government getting in. I've been disappointed by everything they've done. It's the same bunch of people with just a different colour rosette.
Yeah, well, look, Director Tom is happy he got a shout-out. His missus will be proud. Get that clipped up. You're watching Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. Mark Dolan and the one and only, the Queen of all media herself, Dawn Neeson. Lots more to come. Is Donald Trump going to jail? We'll discuss that next.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
This Bank Holiday Monday will be celebrating National Dog Day by uncovering how many pet owners would rather spend the bank holiday with their pet over their partner. In fact, new research has uncovered the 5 key personas that make up Generation Pet. That's a new wave of post-pandemic pet owners, with 58% saying they worry about their pet being diagnosed with a serious illness. Well, joining us now to tell us more about how we should be caring for our pampered pooches is Dr. Edwina Gildia.
Some of the interesting facts coming through that is that 80% of us think that pet as part of the family. The new pet owners who have come on board during the pandemic, there's a lot to learn with being a new pet owner. Interesting facts, as you mentioned, 1/3 of pet owners are preferring to spend time with their pet this weekend over their partner. 60% of pet owners, and Dog Watch specifically calling them out, say that their dog improves their mental health, and 55% noting that improves their physical health by getting out and about.
It's also about showing that love and appreciation for these animals which don't ask anything of us but love.
That was another point that came through this research that we did at Zoetis UK, is that they bring a purpose to life, and I think that's another thing to call out. It's so important for ourselves, for society, to have that purpose, but with that comes responsibility. And that's ensuring that we do support their health, and we know how to do that as well.
If you'd rather spend your bank holiday with your dog than your partner, maybe we've got too much of an over-reliance on our pets?
I think it depends on what way you look at it. For some people, it may be a connection. I think it's a positive thing that we have, and we should celebrate it.
GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria DiPiero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, lots to come in the next hour, but let's talk about this story from the Royal Mail, who are set to axe Saturday delivery of letters for second-class letters. Now, I know that second-class post is not the biggest priority.
About this one, haven't
well,
you?
I'm furious about it because actually a lot of important letters do come through the post still. For example, details of NHS appointments. If you got a parking ticket and you didn't pay it, they will write to you.
Yeah,
they won't email you.
You've got a thing about the parking tickets as well. The NHS thing, I think, is interesting because the NHS, and this is where they waste an awful lot of money as well, they will send you an email, they will send you a text message, and then 3 weeks after you've had the appointment, they will send you a letter in the post.
Correct.
So it's a waste of money, and will you really notice?
Well, this is the thing is, I think there are lots of people who enjoy an itemised phone bill, for example, an itemised credit card statement. You know, a lot of stuff still comes through the post.
You can get that online.
Well, you can, but people prefer the hard copy. I've got relatives, older relatives, who like to receive, you know, their bills. They can go through it page by page and go, my goodness, I spent £10 in Marks and Spencer's last month. What was that on? You know, and I just think it empowers people. What I'm worried about, I know it's only second-class post, but I think it's the thin end of the wedge. And I think ultimately you'll have mail deliveries once or twice a week if we carry on this rate.
Well, I mean, to be honest with you, it's pretty much feeling like that in any case, isn't it?
Well, you don't. I mean, all you get is big fat cheques through the post.
Well, yeah, of course. Now, actually, the one thing you don't want to get through the post is those brown envelopes from Inland Revenue.
Yeah, you don't want to do that.
Because it's never, hello, we owe you loads of money, is it? It's always the opposite.
It's never good news. Let me tell you, Dawn Neeson is pretty much bankrolling the NHS as we speak, so we better thank her for that. But listen, what do you think? Would you be willing to lose Saturday deliveries? gbnews.com/your say. I just think it's sort of part of the general mood in this country, which is we're chipping away at the edges. We don't have bank branches in the street. We're losing post offices, and now we don't get posts at the weekend.
No.
I just think it's a race to the bottom, Dawn. I'm not happy.
I think that's true. I do think that's true.
And also, what about my fan mail? I get so much of that. You can barely open the door at the weekend.
Just send him an email. Just keep him happy. Meanwhile, I'm going to go to the weather just to stop you talking about yourself.
You're my biggest
fan. Here's your weather forecast.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there and welcome to the latest forecast for GB News from the Met Office. Cloudy for many of us today, very wet in the south and southwest, increasingly so. Very warm. Meanwhile, in the northwest, we've got low pressure over the near continent, an easterly airflow and weather fronts moving up and stalling across southern parts of the UK. So this blossoming area of rain across southern counties of England into South Wales, increasingly heavy and persistent as we head into the afternoon for parts of Hampshire, Dorset, Devon and Cornwall. And that could cause some issues, so a rain warning in force. Meanwhile, a lot of cloud across central and eastern parts, some drizzle and mist and low cloud for northeast England, eastern Scotland, but western Scotland, Northern Ireland, seeing plenty of sunshine. And over the next couple of days here, it's going to turn increasingly warm, almost like summer has arrived at last. But it's not the case for the southwest into the evening, with some very heavy rainfall for the evening rush, and that could cause some transport disruption for a time. As you can see, a lot of low cloud and some mist and drizzle for northeast England, eastern Scotland, western Scotland meanwhile, as well as Northern Ireland. A beautiful end to the day, plenty of blue skies before the sun goes down. And we're going to keep the clear skies in the northwest overnight. Northwest England and North Wales also seeing clear spells. But wherever you are, it's going to be a mild night because relatively humid air is arriving from the east. That's originating over Central Europe. So temperatures of 15 to 18 Celsius as we start off Friday. A fairly muggy night wherever you are. And another wet start to the day across the south and southwest. Some increasingly heavy rain once again, potentially causing issues on the roads first thing. That does ease a little into the afternoon, but there'll still be some damp weather around. Meanwhile, sunnier skies further north. Temperatures peaking in the mid to high 20s in the northwest.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
This is your chance to...
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together and what have we got, in my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Mark Dolan Tonight is your weekend dose of news, debate and entertainment.
This sounds like a wild conspiracy theory.
Don't miss My Big Opinion, Mark Meets, and My Take at 10.
Democracy is a funny old thing.
And we don't do boring, not on my watch. I just won't have it.
Let's go and get another glass of that bubbly. You've earned it.
That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Saturday and Sunday, 9 to 11, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
A very good afternoon, Britain. It's 2 o'clock on Thursday, the 5th of September. I'm Mark Dolan and she is Dawn Neeson.
I am indeed. The Chief Inspector of Prison warns risky criminals will be among nearly 2,000 offenders released early next week, saying authorities are simply not prepared. We'll be getting the thoughts of a former prisoner on that one.
Also, Prince William is back to work, visiting an exhibition on homelessness in London. It comes as he came face-to-face with his own brother, Prince Harry, at their uncle's funeral in Norfolk last week. Can the two royal brothers bury the hatchet?
No, probably not. And a proposed crackdown on water company bosses who could face 2 years in prison for not controlling sewage flowing into waterways. This show is all about you and your views. It's not about us. Very, very simple. gbnews.com/your say and tell us what you're thinking about anything you want to chat about, even about Mark Dolan's outfit. What is that tie? I mean, you look like a schoolboy. Sorry, there I said it.
I feel very embarrassed. Listen, Primark's finest. Don't knock it till you've tried it. Machine washable, just like the suit. Folks, I'm also excited. We're going to talk about the sewage in the water, OK? We know that it's dangerous to swim in large parts of the country. But what about drinking water? Is the water in your tap affected? We'll be asking a water sommelier. That's right. So all of that to come. Lots to get through. First, the news headlines and Sam Francis.
Very good afternoon to you from the newsroom. The time is 2 minutes past 2 and the top story this hour. The Crown Prosecution Service says it has dropped 2 indecent assault charges against Harvey Weinstein. It was alleged the disgraced Hollywood producer in 1996. However, the Special Crime Division, which continually reassesses cases, says it found no realistic chance of conviction. And in a statement, the CPS have reiterated their commitment to prosecuting sexual assault cases and encourage any potential victims to come forward and report to police. Well, as we were hearing from Mark and Dawn, water bosses could face up to 2 years in jail under new laws aimed at cracking down on pollution in the rivers, seas and lakes across the country. The government claims the new water bill gives regulators more powers to fine executives or face time behind bars if they fail to protect water quality. Meanwhile, the government has admitted that not all buildings with the same dangerous cladding as Grenfell Tower have been identified. That's following the damning findings published yesterday. The Prime Minister has pledged to review all 58 recommendations from the Grenfell inquiry, with a full response due within 6 months. The report has heavily criticised some building firms, with families and survivors calling for swift punishment for those found at fault. Meanwhile, the Met Police are continuing to investigate potential criminal charges, which they say could take up to 18 months. Detectives investigating the murder of a top chef who was attacked at the Notting Hill Carnival have released these images of 16 potential witnesses. Musi Mnetu from Dubai was found unconscious with a head injury in Queensway in the capital, but sadly died 4 days later. One man has been charged, but detectives are still piecing together the 41-year-old's movements. The Met's Specialist Crime Command is now urging anyone who may recognise the people in the images to come forward, saying they believe the individuals may have vital information. A 14-year-old boy has appeared in court charged with murdering an 8-year-old grandfather in Leicestershire. Bim Coley, who died from a neck injury while walking his dog, was just seconds away from home. The boy, who can't be named, has been remanded in custody and is now appearing at Leicester Crown Court. In France, the EU's former Brexit negotiator, Michel Barnier, has been appointed as Prime Minister. President Emmanuel Macron made the announcement this afternoon in a bid to resolve the political gridlock in the country after a snap summer election. At 73, Barnier will be the oldest Prime Minister in France's modern political history, taking over from Gabriel Attal, who was the youngest. A gunman shot dead by police in central Munich has been identified as an 18-year-old Austrian national believed to have been living in Austria. That's according to police in Germany. Authorities say they are still investigating the motive behind the shooting. But Germany's State Interior Minister has confirmed the attack was planned on the Israeli consulate in Munich. Details on that still emerging. We will keep across them for you and bring you any more updates throughout this afternoon. Well, students, families and teachers have gathered to remember the victims of a mass school shooting in Georgia just weeks after classes began. A 14-year-old boy, described by US police as pure evil, killed 2 students and 2 teachers at his high school. Colt Gray also injured 9 others with a semi-automatic rifle before surrendering to police. Authorities have now confirmed that he had been questioned last year over online threats, but acted alone in his attack. He'll be charged and tried as an adult. Olympic marathon runner Rebecca Cheptegei has died after being set on fire by her boyfriend, according to the head of Uganda's Olympic Committee. The 33-year-old, who competed just weeks ago in Paris, suffered burns to over 75% of her body. She's the 3rd female athlete killed in the country since 2021, while the Ugandan president has called that attack cowardly and senseless. Back here, 7 in 10 children aged 9 to 13 have encountered harmful online content, according to new research. 20% of children in that age group have also been contacted online by strangers, while 17% have viewed dangerous online challenges. Despite spending an average of 23 hours online a week, parents are being warned about underestimating their children's screen time. The government, though, insists it is committed to creating a safer online world, with ministers saying it's vital for the health of society. And finally, some royal news for you. The Prince of Wales has arrived at the Saatchi Gallery in London in just the last few minutes to tour what's been described as a groundbreaking exhibition showcasing art created by former rough sleepers. That exhibition, called Homelessness Reframed, aims to raise awareness about the realities of rough sleeping. Some of the featured works include a structure by the artist David Tovey, who once lived in a car, and other pieces by some emerging creatives, while the Prince will be meeting artists and young contributors during that visit. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. More in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you very much, Sam, and welcome back. Now, I've got to read this one out, Mark.
Go for it.
Some people are mentioning your tie and saying that it
be very
makes you look
flattering,
like
I'm sure.
a slightly overgrown schoolboy. But I'm going to read this one out. Mark Gerard, is Dolan's Barnet machine washable like his tie?
All of it is. It all goes in the machine. Bit of aerial, 30 degrees. Let me tell you, the only reason I'm dressed smartly is not because I'm on television or working with Dawn Neeson. It's because I got a court appearance later, so wish me luck. I jest, of course. Look, let's get to a more serious matter, and it's our dirty waterways. Dawn.
Yes, indeed, yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, I just cannot understand, right, OK, you're allowed to put a little bit of sewage into the waterway if it rains heavily. I mean, how is that even a thing for a start?
Indeed, yeah. It's years and years of underinvestment, isn't it? Well, water firm bosses could face up to 2 years behind bars for covering up sewage dumping. The new laws proposed by the government will give more powers to regulators to tackle pollution and make it easier for companies to be fined.
Water company executives have previously only faced the threat of fines for obstructing investigations about sewage spills. But is being sent to prison really the answer to protecting the environment? GB News political correspondent Catherine Forster joins us now to explain exactly what this potential new legislation means.
Yes, good afternoon from a very windy Putney, where the Environment Secretary, Steve Reid, was giving a speech at a rowing club just along to my right a little bit earlier. Let's start by taking a look at what he had to say.
Instead of protecting our waterways, water companies were allowed to pay out multi-million-pound bonuses and billions in dividends, and the Conservative government was too weak to stop them. The result? This year's annual boat race here in Putney was overshadowed by health warnings telling rowers not to enter the water due to high levels of sewage. We've inherited a broken water system that affects us all, from the health and happiness of communities to the quality and resilience of our food system and the natural environment. These are systemic issues that require a proper reset with a reformed water sector.
In that speech, he also described the water sector as being associated with decline and cover-ups, and there's a huge amount of public anger, isn't there? It helped the Liberal Democrats get to, 70-odd seats in Parliament. So this government is promising to get tough with water companies and water bosses, potential prison sentences of up to 2 years for water bosses, bans on bonuses if they've been polluting, and also looking ahead, saying there's going to be water shortages. Now, they're saying they're going to force private companies to give huge amounts in investment to build new reservoirs, etc. One thing that I thought was interesting was Steve Reid did mention the possibility of nationalisation, and he said about that it would cost billions and take years. I am more interested in a model that works. In a lobby briefing with journalists afterwards, we asked him specifically if he would rule out renationalisation, and he said yes. So they're saying they're going to get tough. How quickly things will change, well, time will tell.
Catherine Forster, brilliant stuff, our GB News political correspondent there. I think you got some viewer feedback, Dawn.
Yeah, straight away. gbnews.com/yoursay if you want to get in touch as well. This is Mark. Lots of people echoing your thoughts. Mark says no one will be jailed from the water companies. They pay political parties too much. Plus, there is no space in jail. We're letting everyone out on Tuesday, though, aren't we? It's Starmer talking rubbish. That's not the word you use, but I'm paraphrasing there.
There you go. Family show, isn't it? Now, Doran Binder is a water sommelier and founder of Crag Water. He joins us now. Doran, welcome to the show. First of all, is Britain's tap water safe?
That's an interesting debate, and there seems to be mixed messaging about it and confusion. And there's nothing worse that could really be happening to a utility or something as important as water, only the most important liquid on planet Earth. So the fact that we're debating, is it safe or not, to me is enough to make people nervous about drinking it, and certainly I wouldn't be drinking it at the moment, no.
What's in tap water that might be a concern, Doran?
I suppose the issue is, if we're talking about what we know, so we know that there was the outbreak of Ectosporidia last month in Devon. We know that that medication is urinated and recirculated through the water system. There are issues and concerns with that in my opinion, people need to be aware of, because we are 70–80% made of water. The quality of the water that we put in the human body that's made of water has an impact.
Doran, I mean, that doesn't sound safe to drink from the tap, but also there's a report today saying it's not safe to drink from plastic bottles, given that, you know, the cancer-causing chemicals that can get from the plastic into the water. What are we meant to be drinking?
I know, it's brilliant. It's almost as if there's a targeted media campaign around scaring people from drinking water. We only hear about microplastics in bottles of water. We don't hear about it in plastic bottles of milk or in other plastic containers of fizzy drinks. Imagine what's going on in a pot noodle when you pour boiling water into that plastic container. But we only hear about bottled water. And I wonder why. Is there a targeted campaign to put people off drinking water?
You do wonder. Now, you have your own water business. It is called Crag Water. You were successful at the 2023 Taste Awards. Why should we be paying for water, Doran?
It all comes down to quality and awareness. So something that's happened in the English-speaking world where we just seem to have been dumbed down in the world of water. If we go to continental Europe, Italy, Spain, France, you go to Eastern Europe, there is an absolute awareness and people know, it's in their culture, they understand the differences between different grades of water. But something happened to us in this country, only fools and horses, water privatisation, it's only water, innit, Beardy? It's only the most important liquid on the planet, and we have been dumbed down. So when we look at the differences in water, if we compare tap water to the world of natural mineral and spring water, which is the premium of the category. So forget about brands, and as the founder of Crag Spring Water, the category of the water, if you're buying bottled water, only buy natural mineral spring. Because if it doesn't say natural mineral spring, it could be anything. It could be filtered tap water in a bottle. So people need to be aware and understand what it is they're buying if they're buying bottled water.
What about tap? Well, sort of not tap water. What about tap water that's filtered? What do you think of those filter jugs, or indeed the filters that you can put into the?
Taps, you can get filter
the tap built in. What do you think about that?
I think as long as people are aware, they're fantastic. But the issue is that when you're adding a filter to your tap water at home, you are adding another filtration or another process to that water, and that water has been through multiple processes already. So as long as you're aware that when you filter tap water, it will never compare to the best category, being natural mineral and spring. So it's basically organic versus processed. Tap water being processed water, laboratory, man-filtered, man-blended. Natural mineral spring water has been done by Mother Nature, untouched by man. And that's why they're all different, by the way. And I spend my life doing water tasting.
Doran, I know how to tell whether I'm drinking a nice glass of wine or not, but how do I tell whether I've got a nice glass of water in front of me?
It's the mouthfeel and the taste. So when you come and do a water tasting, when we introduce waters, we do that between 10 and 15 different waters. And when waters are lined up in front of you one by one with an explanation as to what's going on, and what you're going to taste. And when you tune your brain into water, that's when the world of water opens up. But when there's no awareness, there is no conversation. So I've never heard anybody talking about water in my life before I fell into this. And then as I discovered what's going on in the world of water, I just thought, this is incredible. Everybody needs to know.
You fell into water. There you go. That's a line. Let me tell our viewers and listeners that your website is cragspringwater.co.uk. More power to you, Doran. Thank you so much for joining us.
you.
Let me tell you that other water brands are available. Evian, Perrier. Of course, people might not know this, but Dawn, you've got a very good way of making tap water safe, haven't you? You put gin in it.
I actually just skipped the water completely, but Doran's brand has got his face on it, and none of it's in plastic bottles. It's glass bottles and tin.
When he said we need to drink more water, you positively recoiled, I've got to say.
I have to, I sort of like, yeah. But is there not water in wine?
Just a bit. You could definitely read the Bible and think that was the case. You're watching Good Afternoon Britain, where we're performing miracles until 3 o'clock. By the way, shall I just put a plug in for you and I tomorrow?
Yes, please do.
Yeah, because we are very lucky.
Not a Bath plug either. So
too right.
water.
She'll be on the gin tonight because we are doing breakfast tomorrow. Yes, we are. Looking forward to that. Stephen and Anne taking a well-deserved break, so we're doing that. Don't forget Mark Dolan tonight, back at the weekend. We don't stop, do we?
No, non-stop.
But lots more to come. Prince William, what's he up to?
He is launching a royal fight against homelessness, attending a groundbreaking exhibition at the Saatchi Gallery. But he's yet to call a truce with his brother. More on that very shortly.
There you go. The royal brothers at war. That's next.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
An army veteran has become the world's most tattooed woman after a 10-year journey to ink 99.98% of her body. I mean, that's really nearly everywhere. But I wonder, yes, she is unusual, and you'd know her if you met her, frankly, wouldn't you? But are tattoos acceptable they're becoming more and more acceptable just amongst all of us, aren't they? But what about in the workplace?
99.98% of her body tattooed. Do you think this would affect the way that she is received at work?
I do affect it would how she is seen at work, just purely because tattoos are still so stigmatised in the workplace. In today's rapidly evolving society, the traditional standards of what is socially acceptable are being redefined. Facial tattoos, full body tattoos, once stigmatised, are increasingly seen as a form of personal expression, and there shouldn't be a barrier to one's professional or social life.
If you are going for a job, for instance, we make up 90% of our minds about somebody within the first 3 seconds. And I have written a book on body language, and the face is just so important. You need to have the smile, you need to be able to read the facial expression, even when we're speaking. Now, if the face is really heavily tattooed, you can't do that.
Jade said that there is still this stigma, particularly to facial tattoos. We do judge people with tattoos, don't we?
We do. Unfortunately, we do, because it's not the norm. And as a human being, we tend to judge what is not the norm. And as Jade says, we are getting much more used to it. It is much more socially acceptable. But a lot of firms will say, if you've got a tattoo, you cover it. We don't want tattoos in the workplace.
GB News, the People's Channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is the nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello and welcome back. Right, brace yourself. I'm going to mention the O word. We've already done the B word today, as in Brexit. Now we're going to do the Oasis word, because the Competition and Markets Authority has today launched an investigation into Ticketmaster regarding the sale of those Oasis tickets for the band's upcoming reunion tour, including how so-called dynamic pricing may have been used. Now, we've been talking about this story an awful lot, haven't we? And people were getting very annoyed. I know it's like, it just doesn't apply to Oasis, by the way. Other concerts and even football matches, certainly in Europe, this applies to now as well.
Indeed.
So basically, companies like Ticketmaster are using dynamic pricing. The more demand there is, the higher the price goes, to stop the touts selling tickets at a profit by acting kind of like touts themselves.
So is that it? Is that the idea? It's a mechanism to stop touting?
Well, it's in theory, yeah, absolutely. And the more demand there is, it's not just tickets, by the way. I mean, Uber do it as well.
Yeah, the airlines do it notoriously. I mean, you've got to be careful when you check the price of a flight, because 10 minutes later it's doubled.
Yes, yeah, and it depends on when you're buying it and et cetera, et cetera. So I understand why it's happening. But you have people, for the Oasis tickets in particular, I think Taylor Swift and Bruce Springsteen, all those days that same apply. You were sitting queuing for hours on end for a 150 quid ticket, standing on the floor or whatever venue it happened to be on. You got to the bit where you press the button, buy your ticket, and it was £365.
You lost me at the idea of queuing for Taylor Swift. I mean, can you name one of her hits?
No. Oh, look what you made me do. Look what you made me do.
Yeah, but what about her hits? Oh, I see. OK. See where you're going with that one. Also, can I ask you another question? Why is it a matter for the government? Why is the Prime Minister stepping in? Because I think the message from Keir Starmer is he doesn't like capitalism. He's basically saying a company's making money, we're going to put a stop to that.
I think he just wants to... Well, let's face it, the Oasis fan base are older, aren't they? They're going to be people in their 50s. I just think Keir Starmer just doesn't like anyone that's getting old.
Well, no, he doesn't want...
For a start.
What it is, he doesn't want us to have any fun. He doesn't want you to have a cigarette in the beer garden. He doesn't want you older viewers and listeners to this show to be warm and comfortable in their houses this winter, and he doesn't want us bopping at Wembley Stadium or Heaton Park to Oasis.
But don't you think they've got slightly more important things to worry about? I mean, immigration?
Yeah.
Just saying, NHS,
no, there you go.
Possibly.
You can but hope. And now the Prince of Wales has arrived at the Saatchi Gallery in London for an exhibition showcasing the art of former rough sleepers. William will meet the artists and contributors during his visit. It follows his face-to-face meeting with Prince Harry at their uncle's funeral last week. But can the feuding royal brothers bury their hatchet? It's a very good question. Well, listen, he's currently online trying to get tickets for Oasis, but let's interrupt him because royal correspondent and writer Michael Cole joins us now. Michael, good to see you. And homelessness, a cause close to the heart of the Prince of Wales.
Good afternoon, Mark. Good afternoon, Dawn. You're absolutely right. He was only 11 years old 31 years ago when Princess Diana took him and his brother to visit homeless people in London. She wanted to get them out of the privileged bubble they were living in to make sure they knew what was going on in the outside world. But it became a lifelong cause for Prince William. And last year, he and his wife, the Princess of Wales, through their Royal Foundation, set up Homewards, which is a 5-year programme in 6 cities around the United Kingdom to try and bring people together, NGOs and local authorities and like-minded charitable people, to try and prevent this happening, so that if homelessness happens, it's very rare and it's very brief. He's very sincerely committed to this, and I think he's having some success, and he's reaching out abroad to other people who are confronting this problem. And I think hats off to him, because it needs to be done, and it is something which can be prevented if enough goodwill and resources and human intellect are brought to bear on the problem.
Michael, am I right in thinking that it wasn't that long ago that William declared that he wanted to end homelessness completely? I mean, how's that going for him?
Well, that is entirely it. This is this Homewards element of the Royal Foundation, which was set up in June last year with the Princess of Wales. He believes, and I think it's you can't really be contradicted, if there's enough goodwill to solve this problem. Of course, 1 or 2 people prefer to have that sort of life. They prefer to be vagrants, and there may be very many problems that cause them to be in that mind. But for people who are homeless, homeless without cause, without reason for themselves. It is possible to solve it, and that's what he believes. And these 6 centres around the country, he's trying to bring people together sincerely in order to solve this. It is a scourge. It's terrible to see. We see it around the streets. One wishes one could help, but he's trying to do something. Of course, when you're a member of the royal family, you're not supposed to indulge in politics. But every question, of course, is political at the end until it becomes something to do with God. You know, it's a problem that he wants to get on top of, and I think congratulations to him.
Michael, what's the latest on the Prince of Wales's relationship with his brother, the Duke of Sussex? Is there any long-term hope that the boys can bury the royal hatchet?
Long term, very, very long term, an ice cap has formed over their relationship, and I can't see it melting for a very long time indeed. Last week they were together for the first time in the same building for more than a year since the coronation at Snettisham in North Norfolk for a memorial service for their uncle, Lord Robert Fellows. But Prince William certainly didn't look at his brother. He didn't speak to his brother. They arrived separately, discreetly, and they left separately without a word. And Prince Harry, instead of going to Anmer Hall, where the Waleses live, about 10 miles away, he went to stay with his uncle, Charles Spencer, the Earl Spencer, at Orthor. And then, of course, while he was there, the anniversary of his mother's death in 1997 came around, and he paid tribute at her grave. It was an extraordinary visit because nobody knew he was coming, and suddenly he was there, having swapped teeming Los Angeles for sleepy North Norfolk. And I'm quite sure that Norfolk in high summer is very beautiful, and I'm sure he has many friends and connections around there. I'm sure he must have been nostalgic for the life that he's left behind and the people he's left behind. But with regarding reconciliation, there are 2 chances of that, slim and none.
Michael, just very quickly, the more virtuous projects like the ending homelessness that William seems to get in, the more Harry feels like he has to do something to distract, like coming up with, well, I'm owed an apology from my brother and my father. Is that the right understanding of what's happening here?
Family feuds are awful by definition. One in the royal family is even worse. The thing is, Dawn, that if you're a member of the royal family, you simply are. You don't have to do anything, you are. If you're a semi-detached member of the royal family living on a hilltop in California, you have to be. You have to be doing something, you have to be going somewhere, you have to be JOE, justification of existence. Trips to Nigeria, trips to Colombia, forever on the back foot trying to demonstrate that you're relevant. Which is not applied to members of the royal family. They know what their job is. I must just say, though, you know, when Prince Harry was here, he was the happy prince. We remember him joking on the running track with Usain Bolt. He was always smiling. Well, you don't really see him smiling very much these days.
No,
which is a great shame.
Absolutely. Michael Cole, I gave up trying to justify my existence, JOE, many years ago. Ask Mrs. Dolan, ask Dawn. Michael, great to see you again. We'll catch up soon. Former top royal correspondent at the BBC, Michael Cole. Coming up.
Thank you. Now, we have some breaking news. A member of the Royal Navy has died following a training incident last night. We'll have more on this with our national reporter after your headlines with Sam Francis.
Very good afternoon to you. It's exactly 30 minutes past 2, and the top story this hour, the Crown Prosecution Service says it has dropped 2 indecent assault charges against Harvey Weinstein. It was alleged the disgraced Hollywood producer had assaulted a woman, now aged in her 50s, in London in 1996. However, the Special Crime Division, which continually reassesses cases, said it found no realistic chance of conviction. In a statement, the Crown Prosecution Service have reiterated, though, their commitment to prosecuting sexual assault cases and encourage any potential victims to come forward and to report to police. Water bosses could face up to 2 years in jail under new laws aimed at cracking down on pollution in England's rivers, seas and lakes. The government claims its new water bill would give regulators more power to fine executives or face time behind bars if they fail to protect water quality. An urgent appeal has been launched to find a 10-month-old girl who's gone missing with her father. Merseyside police are asking the public to help find Layla Rose Wheeler, who was last seen in the area of Wallasey Village in Wirral. A spokesman from the force said there's concern for both of their welfare and described Layla as a girl with short blonde hair and blue eyes. Presenter Jeremy Kyle has defended his former TV programme at an inquest into the death of Steve Diamond, who died after appearing on The Jeremy Kyle Show in 2019. The 63-year-old from Portsmouth reportedly took his own life just a week after failing a lie detector test on that programme, which accused him of cheating on his partner. The inquest has also revealed that Diamond had a history of mental health issues, including multiple attempts to take his own life, and had initially been rejected by the show because of depression. Despite those findings, though, he was later allowed to appear after providing a GP's letter. A gunman shot dead by police in central Munich has been identified as an 18-year-old Austrian national believed to have been living in Austria. That's according to German police. Authorities there are still investigating the suspect's motive, but the State Interior Ministry has confirmed the attack was planned on the Israeli consulate in Munich. Details on that still coming through to us. We'll bring you any updates throughout this afternoon. And just a recap of that breaking news at this stage, limited details, plenty more coming up from Charlie Peters, our national reporter, in just a few minutes. But the Royal Navy have announced that a member of the Royal Navy has died after a Merlin helicopter ditched in the English Channel near Dorset during a night flying exercise. That incident occurred during operations on the coast. No other fatalities at this stage reported or any other serious injuries. The Ministry of Defence, though, confirming that the family of the victim have been informed. As I say, plenty more on that as we get to it with Charlie Peters. That, though, is the latest from the newsroom for now. Sophia Wensler will have your next update at 3 o'clock.
Hi there and welcome to the latest forecast for GB News from the Met Office. Cloudy for many of us today, very wet in the south and southwest, increasingly so. Very warm. Meanwhile, in the northwest, we've got low pressure over the near continent, an easterly airflow and weather fronts moving up and stalling across southern parts of the UK. So this blossoming area of rain across southern counties of England into South Wales, increasingly heavy and persistent as we head into the afternoon for parts of Hampshire, Dorset, Devon and Cornwall. And that could cause some issues, so a rain warning in force. Meanwhile, a lot of cloud across central and eastern parts, some drizzle and mist and low cloud for northeast England, eastern Scotland, but western Scotland, Northern Ireland, seeing plenty of sunshine. And over the next couple of days here, it's going to turn increasingly warm, almost like summer has arrived at last. But it's not the case for the southwest into the evening, with some very heavy rainfall for the evening rush, and that could cause some transport disruption for a time. As you can see, a lot of low cloud and some mist and drizzle for northeast England, eastern Scotland, western Scotland meanwhile, as well as Northern Ireland. A beautiful end to the day, plenty of blue skies before the sun goes down. And we're going to keep the clear skies in the northwest overnight. Northwest England and North Wales also seeing clear spells, but wherever you are, it's going to be a mild night because relatively humid air is arriving from the east. That's originating over Central Europe. So temperatures of 15 to 18 Celsius as we start off Friday. A fairly muggy night wherever you are. And another wet start to the day across the south and southwest. Some increasingly heavy rain once again, potentially causing issues on the roads first thing. That does ease a little into the afternoon, but there'll still be some damp weather around. Meanwhile, sunnier skies further north. Temperatures peaking in the mid to high 20s in the northwest.
The latest GB News travel.
Hi again, good afternoon to you. I'm Jules Buckley. The M62 both ways still has the outside lane coned off. There's a vehicle fire and a collision, so the lane closure in place between the A1M interchange junction 32A and the Ferry Bridge services. That's junction 33. A police incident on the westbound side of the M602 around Trafford Park junction 2 is causing delays. Southbound M61 Horwich at 6 down towards West Horton junction 5's part blocked. An accident there is causing queues to build. Berkshire eastbound M4 Reading Junction 11 to Wokingham and Bracknell Junction 10. 2 out of 4 lanes are coned off there. A collision means a stop-start. And Hertford in Cambridgeshire, the A141. There's a horse box on the road from the BP roundabout to the King's Ripton turn-off, so that stretch is closed and queuing. And for now, that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Hello, welcome back. Now, some breaking news. A member of the Royal Navy has died following a training incident last night. Joining us for the latest is our national reporter, Charlie Peters. Charlie, thank you for coming in and bringing us up to date on this story. It sounds horrific.
Yeah, sad news that a Merlin helicopter was dumped into the Channel last night during night flying exercises. And we have a statement from the Royal Navy. A spokesperson said it's with great sadness that we must report a member of the Royal Navy has died following a training incident last night. Our thoughts are with the family who have been informed and all those affected at this sad time. A full investigation will take place. And we've got some more information on the incident now. The helicopter ditched into the Channel while conducting night flying exercises with HMS Queen Elizabeth, one of our 2 aircraft carriers. That's what a spokesperson has earlier said. And it involved a Merlin Mark IV helicopter. There are 2 variants of this helicopter introduced into the service in 1999. The Mark IV helicopter is for the Commando Helicopter Force, so it supports the Royal Marines. The Mark II is for primarily anti-submarine patrols at sea. Now, it's understood that there were 3 crew members aboard this particular helicopter at the time of the incident. 2 of those were rescued and were taken to hospital. It's understood they didn't suffer serious injuries, but the 3rd crew member, whose body was recovered, did die at the scene, but their name has not been released. There was another Merlin helicopter of a similar variant in the air at the time, taking part in the same night flying exercise. We've also been told that the Coast Guard assisted in the rescue operation. No further injuries or fatalities. In some really sad news from the Channel.
Now, these incidents are incredibly rare, aren't they? Which is why we're talking about it as live breaking news, because it very rarely happens.
Yeah, and there are people who are living in Somerset, particularly near Yeovil, will see these Merlin helicopters flying constantly in the area. There are almost 30 of them of that variant, another 30 further down in Cornwall, constantly flying in that area. The Royal Navy Air Station in Yeovil is extremely busy, supporting, as you've just heard, the Queen Elizabeth in the Channel. But this helicopter force supports the Royal Marines and other assets of the Royal Navy around the globe. It's an extremely high-tempo and highly deployable organisation.
How much of a culture of health and safety is there around military training?
Well, intense, especially for something as dangerous as helicopter flying is. Right. Incidents are rare, as Dawn has said, but anyone involved in flying helicopters or just being involved in being part of a crew or potentially taking them on will go through a full set of training, and including being ditched in the sea, which appears to have happened last night in the Channel.
Indeed, and of course the time of day would potentially be a factor in terms of the risks at play here, given the lack of visibility at night.
And to have one other helicopter in the nighttime exercise at the time almost certainly would have assisted in the rescue operation supported by the Coast Guard. But yeah, a tragic incident, 1 person killed in that incident.
Tragic indeed. Charlie, thank you for that. Well, in the last few minutes, Defence Secretary John Healey has described the news of the death of a Royal Navy member of personnel as dreadful.
Oh, it is incredibly sad, and thoughts with the family and friends of all involved. This is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. There's lots more coming up on today's show, including a mysterious bright flash that was captured above the Earth by an astronaut aboard the International Space Station. Spooky.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Let's have a look at this story in the Telegraph, Charlie. This is about Anglican Church, the Church of England, dropping the word church in favour of something a bit more modern sounding. Words such as community. Why are we afraid of the word church?
Well, that's my question. I mean, you've got to assume that they think it solves some kind of problem. But I think, there are a lot of people who feel very strongly about their particular religious institution, whatever they all have different names, don't they? And if you rename one, do you have to rename all of them? Can we no longer use an individual name for different religions' community buildings?
Are you religious?
I'm spiritual.
You sound like him. Yeah.
No, certainly.
Oh, don't get any started on me.
Do I believe in a God? Yes. Oh. Do I believe in any of the particular gods that are offered to us? Still undecided.
I'm like you. I said exactly that.
You two are the same. You two are exactly.
What about you, Anna? Are you particularly religious?
Well, I'm not a proper religious. I wouldn't name myself as a religious, but I really do respect religions. And we have bigger problems to think about.
Is it a sign of where we're at in this secular society?
Yes.
We're moving more and more towards that the Anglican Church feels that the only way to be relevant is to take away any reference to church going, to being religious.
I think if the substance of what you're offering is good, it doesn't matter what it's called. You know, so if people are going to find solace and peace in a place that makes them feel better, they're not going to care too much about what it's called. So I think relabeling it, rebranding it, I don't know, maybe it'll help, maybe it won't, but it's going to certainly upset a lot of people, I should think.
And people whose religion is important to them and kind of central to their lives, you can imagine.
Absolutely.
There's a reason Justin Welby is nicknamed by some quarters the Archbishop of Woke. Maybe this adds fuel to the fire, who knows?
GB News, the People's Channel.
Tune in to Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan. GB News royalty with your perfect start to the weekend. Lucky us. Feisty and fearless guests.
Well, I'm a normal person, so ask me.
Honest opinions that raises more questions than a Gary Barlow tax return. And a few surprises along the way.
Might be cold in this studio.
That is Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan. 8 to 9 only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together and what have we got, in my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Now, a mysterious bright flash was captured above Earth by an astronaut aboard the International Space Station. Matthew Dominic released these 3 images showing a bright flash in the atmosphere. Don't blink or you miss it, though.
OK, well, let's speak to an expert who can tell us more. Astronomer and broadcaster, a very old friend of mine, Mark Thompson. Mark, good to see you again. What on earth have we just seen?
It's wonderful, isn't it? It's beautiful. So we think it's probably related to meteor activity, chunks of rock falling to Earth. But, of course, we normally only see that from down here. We don't often get to see it from above looking down, which makes it all the more special.
Indeed. Why is an understanding of space so important for my viewers and listeners, Mark?
Well, do you know, one of the reasons is that we live on planet Earth here on the ground, and space is up there, but we interact with space in so many different ways. You know, you've only got your mobile phone, which uses satellite technology to allow communications, navigation on your phone system in your car, and all that relies upon satellites up in space. And all these pieces of rock, and I've actually got an example of what that thing was. It's one of these, a chunk of space rock that would have plummeted through the atmosphere, causing the gas to heat up and glow as it fell. And those pieces of rock that fly through space can hit the satellites which are up in orbit. Ultimately, they could cause harm and damage to astronauts and space travelers in the future. But it has a very real impact on satellite technology, and that has an impact on our day-to-day lives down here as well.
Mark, I'm going to have to talk to you about the front page of the Daily Star today, because it'd be rude of me not to. The front page of the Daily Star says that Donald Trump has vowed to share UFO close encounter videos from America's real-life X-Files if he's elected president again. What do you make of that one?
Does my face say it all? You know what? I've looked at the sky for quite a few years now, too many than I'd care to remember. I have seen nothing at all that makes me believe there's anything in this, up flying around in space that's alien in any way, shape or form. What I would add is that the universe is a big place. The nearest star system to our own is 4 light years. That means travelling at the speed of light, which is 300,000 kilometres every single second. It would take 4 years for light to reach us. Now, that technology is way, 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 way beyond our capability, and the universe probably isn't even old enough for civilization to even develop that kind of technology. So, little green men, aliens. If I was a betting man, I'd put it down to be some sort of voting scheme to try and get people to vote for it.
Mark, is global warming having any impact on space or our understanding of it?
No, global warming doesn't really have any impact on space because the Earth is, I want to say a closed system, but it's not a closed system in that we interact, our planet interacts with the space environment around it. But what I would say is that our space environment has an impact on global warming. And, you know, there's radiation from the sun that has an impact on our atmosphere. But the bigger issue is our own impact on the atmosphere and what that means for our interaction. If we lose some of the protective layers around the Earth, then that starts to impact us because we start to have more radiation from space getting through to us here on the planet Earth, and that's going to have an impact on health and technology. But you know, I'm hopeful that if we start being sensible and cautious about what we do with our day-to-day lives, then actually, you know, we can make a difference, and hopefully we can turn it all around.
And is it true that there's a load of rubbish in space?
We're covering everything, aren't we? Yes, there is. Satellite technology has been around for a few decades now. And so we've got these lumps of space technology floating around us in orbit. There are occasions where there's satellites will impact each other. Old satellites will crash into other satellites. Flecks of paint. There's even an old toolbox that's floating around in space as well that's dropped by an astronaut on an International Space Station mission. So yeah, there's flecks of paint traveling at ballistic speeds. There's bolts, screws that have fallen off spacecraft where they've had impacts. And if that builds up to excessive amounts, actually we could ultimately be cut off from space. Hopefully we can find some ways to clean up space before we spread our wings a little bit further into the solar system.
Mark, talking about covering all bases on this interview with you, which we are, and floating about in space, the two astronauts that are up there now that are pretty much stranded up there, that to me just sounds terrifying.
Yeah, it does. I mean, they're stranded in a place where it's designed to sustain human life. So they're in the International Space Station. I think their mission was only supposed to be about 8 days or something. It's ended up being quite a bit longer than that. The spacecraft that's going to bring them back, they've had quite a number of issues with the methane propulsion system. Methane-driven propulsion system. They've had leaks. There was even reports of hearing a strange sound over the radio system. That's not unusual for space travellers. Even back to the Apollo missions, they heard strange noises, not aliens. I would hasten to add, probably just some sort of interference from either space radiation or interference from the technology itself. So yes, it sounds like they're going to be stuck there for a little while yet, but there are plans to get them back with another spacecraft that's scheduled to get up there in the next few weeks, hopefully.
Mark, lovely to see you again. Thank you for that glossary of expertise about all matters astronomy and broadcasting.
There's no little green men. He said there was no little green men.
Well, I think there are. I think the aliens are there, and frankly, they can come and run the country for all I care.
I think they already are.
Yeah,
to be honest.
Probably true. Now, millions of people across the country are at breaking point as shockingly low incomes leave them without the basics and fearing debt collectors.
That's according to debt advice charity Christians Against Poverty, who have released a report today showing 11.8 million people in the UK don't have enough money to live on. Anna Riley has a story for us.
Christians Against Poverty debt advisors like Helen Bolton provide free financial support in churches across the nation. The charity's latest report warns that chronically low incomes are devastating the lives of millions in the UK. This is due to a deficit budget where people's earnings aren't enough to cover the essentials.
We're really surprised to find out that 22% of the population are in this situation, and that equates in the UK to 14.4 million people that are inevitably living in poverty because they've not got enough money coming in to pay their essential bills. The overall headline inflation is coming down, but inflation on the basics of life is not coming down, or is coming down very, very slowly. Meanwhile, incomes, whether that's salaries, wages, or benefits, have not gone up anywhere near in line with inflation, and so inevitably things are squeezed.
Michelle Neal was helped by the charity after falling into £30,000 of debt. Her home was repossessed and she relied on food banks as her carer's wage didn't cover her bills.
There weren't any food in house. It was just one nightmare after another, and we had to start... Well, basically what we had to do is we had to go back and live with Mum for a while. And bearing in mind Mum had dementia, which weren't good, but fortunately council came through because we were classed as homeless. Council came through and we got... It weren't greatest of properties, but it were a roof over his head. Not easy when you're on your own, paying bills and things like that, especially if it's going to go up.
With the energy price increase next month, Christians Against Poverty want the government to take action now.
We will have people who are cold, who are sitting in the dark, who have... The mental health is going down the pan. One of the things that we're campaigning for is for the government to look at like a minimum income standard, whether that is through benefits or whether that is through legislation about minimum wages or minimum hours that people are contracted for. I guess just to accept that there's not a lot more can be done about expenditure, and so we've got to look at giving a minimum level of income to all families.
Christians Against Poverty are calling for the public to support their campaign, and they hope the Labour Party will listen. Anna Riley, GB News.
OK, brilliant. Anna, an important story, and thank you for that coverage.
Now, actually, can we talk about aliens?
Go for it.
He has never seen any alien film.
I have never seen an alien. I've seen Mrs. Dolan without makeup, but I don't think that's the same thing, is it?
No, that's definitely not the same thing, and I don't think you can say that. Mrs. Dolan, thoughts and prayers with you. But I mean, we've just done that brilliant interview with what's his name, Mark
Thompson.
Mark Thompson.
Glad someone's concentrating.
Yeah, exactly. Who says that aliens don't exist? And Max, hi Max, says that's very ignorant of him to believe that we only life in the universe. Are there aliens visiting us? Who knows? Maybe they started life here and come back from time to time for observation. Bigger question is, does anyone care? I care. Lots of people care about little green men
have you ever seen an alien or indeed a ghost?
No. But...
Well, then where does all this belief come from in aliens? You've got no evidence.
Me, no.
This is GB News.
Lots of people believe
This is the home of real news, not fake news.
Lots of people believe in aliens.
Yeah, well, you used to work for the Stars, so there's a lot of stuff you believe in that
it sells
we
papers.
shouldn't really go there.
No, but ghosts. Do you believe in ghosts?
I do.
Have you? Oh, really? Have you?
Yeah,
What makes you
I've had a
believe in ghosts?
mysterious... a cup of sugar turned upside down. Came down for breakfast one morning. Absolute miracle. How did that happen? There you go. We didn't need the
I've spent lots of nights in haunted houses and never had an experience.
Well, this studio is haunted by some of the best broadcasters in the country, many of whom are up next. For example, Ben Leo in place of Martin Daubney. And don't forget that tomorrow from 6 a.m. That's right, 6 a.m. Dawn and I have got an early start. So are you just going to tap me on the shoulder at 5 a.m. or what?
I'll just give you a nudge, roll out tonight.
Were you going to bring me a cup of tea?
Well, but with the spooky turned over sugar.
I tell you what, Mr. Neeson's going to kill me. Listen, we look forward to seeing you tomorrow for breakfast. Ben Leo is next in for Martin Daubney. Keep it GB News, a really busy afternoon of current affairs to come.
We'll see you for breakfast tomorrow, but here's your weather.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there, welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. Big contrast today developing across the UK. Very wet in the south, drier elsewhere, and increasingly warm in the northwest. That's where the best of the sunshine will be over the next few days, with easterly winds around the northern flank of this area of low pressure over the continent. And that's the low that is causing a lot of wet weather for South Wales, the south and southwest of England. The rain increasingly heavy as we end the day. Very miserable conditions there for the south and southwest, but it does tend to ease a little overnight. We keep the cloud and certainly a lot of low cloud in the south and the east, but in the northwest, as well as for Northern Ireland, northwest England, well, it's going to be clear as we begin Friday, but it is a warm start to the day wherever you are. We've got humid air arriving from the continent, but around the top of that low pressure system via the North Sea. All that humidity and closest to the low. The instability causing a lot of showers first thing in the south and southwest once again, but drier elsewhere. Some low clouds, mists, har and fret into eastern Scotland as well as northeast England, but western Scotland, Northern Ireland faring best for long spells of sunshine. Likewise for Cumbria, Lancashire and North Wales. Beautiful weather here, having mostly missed out on the summer in the northwest of the UK. Well, the next few days look absolutely glorious. The same can't be said for the south and especially the southwest, where the rain will be on and off through Friday, but it will be heavy at times. And that rain accumulating 50, 100 and in some spots more than 100 millimetres. So rain warning force, risk of localised flooding. But where we do have the sun